Hey my dear listener, before we start, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Comment down where are you from and what's your time right now. Let's jump into the video. Story 1. The quiet rhythm of medieval village life in rural England. If you imagine England in the 14th century, your mind may drift toward castles, armored knights, or the thunder of distant wars. But most people never saw a castle from the inside. Most people never held a sword. The vast majority of men, women, and children lived in villages, small clusters of timber and thatch scattered across the countryside of places like England. You wake before the sun rises. There is no clock ticking on your wall. Time is measured by habit and light. A faint gray glow seeps through the gaps in the shutters of your small house. The air is cool and smells faintly of smoke from last night's fire, which still clings to the rafters. Your home is simple, a timber frame packed with wattle and daub, roofed with straw. The floor beneath you is hard-packed earth. There are no separate bedrooms. You and your family sleep on straw mattresses laid close together for warmth. In winter, perhaps a cow or goat is sheltered at one end of the house, separated only by a low partition. Their warmth is practical, not sentimental. Outside, the village is quiet but not silent. A rooster crows. Somewhere, a wooden door creaks open. The day begins not with urgency but with necessity. You are a villein, a tenant farmer bound to the land of a local lord. The manor you belong to is part of a larger feudal system that ties land, labor, and loyalty together in a slow, enduring pattern. You owe labor to the lord who controls this manor, perhaps under the authority of a noble family with holdings recorded in documents like the Domesday Book, compiled centuries earlier under William the Conqueror. But those names are distant. Your concerns are immediate: soil, weather, animals, bread. You step outside into the early morning chill. The village is arranged around open fields divided into long, narrow strips. This is the open field system, a cooperative method of farming that requires careful coordination among neighbors. No hedges divide the strips. Instead, everyone knows where their family's land begins and ends through custom and memory. The rhythm of your year is dictated by the agricultural calendar. In spring, you plow and sow. In summer, you weed and tend. In autumn, you harvest. In winter, you mend tools and pray for survival. Today is a plowing day. You guide an ox-drawn plow through heavy soil. The oxen move slowly, their breath visible in the cool air. The wooden plow creaks. It is tipped with iron, precious and carefully maintained. Every pass across the field demands patience. There is no rushing this work. The labor is repetitive. Step, guide, press, turn. You feel the resistance of the earth through the handles. The soil here in much of central England is thick clay. It clings to boots and tools alike. Yet this same heavy soil, once turned, can be remarkably fertile. Above you, the sky gradually lightens. The church bell rings in the distance, one measured toll calling the village to morning prayer. The church, built of stone and standing slightly elevated above the cottages, is the most permanent structure in your world. It anchors time itself. You pause your work. Even if you do not attend every service, the sound shapes your day. The liturgical calendar, Advent, Lent, Easter, organizes your year as much as the seasons do. The teachings of the church are woven into everyday thought. Sin, salvation, and divine order are not abstract ideas. They are as real as the soil beneath your feet. The village priest likely knows every family by name. He baptizes your children, blesses your marriage, and will one day oversee your burial in the small graveyard beside the church. Despite the hierarchy of feudal society, village life depends on cooperation. When it is time to harvest, neighbors work side by side. When a roof must be repaired, men gather to lift beams together. Women share tasks too: baking, brewing ale, spinning wool. You may think of medieval life as harsh, and in many ways it is. There are few comforts. Food is simple: coarse bread made from rye or barley, pottage of peas and onions, occasional cheese. Meat is rare except on feast days, yet meals are eaten slowly, often communally. There is no rush to consume and depart. In the evenings after work, you sit near the hearth. The fire provides warmth and light. Someone may tell a story, perhaps a local legend, perhaps a moral tale drawn from sermons. There is no printed book in your house. Literacy is limited. Stories live in memory and voice. There is hardship here, certainly. Illness can spread quickly. A bad harvest can mean hunger. Taxes and labor obligations can feel heavy. Yet there is also a certain predictability. You know what tomorrow will require because it will likely resemble today. The concept of career does not exist for you. Your role is inherited. You farm because your parents farmed. Your children will likely do the same. Ambition is measured not in social mobility but in survival and modest stability. As the morning advances, you pause to wipe sweat from your brow. The oxen shift their weight patiently. A neighbor in the next strip nods to you. Conversation is sparse, not because of hostility, but because words are saved for necessity. You think, perhaps, about the coming harvest. The success of your family depends on cooperation not just with neighbors, but with forces beyond human control. Rain must fall at the right time. Frost must not come too early. Disease must spare the grain. In this world, uncertainty is accepted as part of life rather than something to be optimized away. There are no forecasts, no insurance policies, no distant markets determining prices. There is only land, labor, and hope. At midday, your wife brings bread and small beer to the field. The beer is weak, safer to drink than water drawn from uncertain sources. You sit together on the edge of the strip. There is little conversation about abstract matters. Instead, you discuss the health of a cow, the condition of the thatch roof, the approaching feast day of the local saint. The feast days are important. They punctuate the monotony of labor. On those days, work pauses. There may be music, simple pipes or drums. There may be dancing. Ale flows more freely. For a brief time, hierarchy softens and laughter rises. This alternation between labor and celebration creates a steady cadence. Modern life often compresses work into endless weeks broken only by short weekends. In your village, however, holy days and seasonal pauses create natural intervals of rest. Yet even within this steady rhythm, change is stirring beyond your awareness. Population pressures are increasing across much of medieval Europe. Land is being subdivided into ever narrower strips. Some families struggle to secure enough acreage to sustain themselves. Rumors occasionally reach the village news of conflict between nobles, whispers of distant famine, or reports of disease in far-off towns. Such information travels slowly, carried by traders or wandering clerics. For now, though, your world feels contained. The boundaries of your life are visible: the fields, the forest beyond, the small river that marks the edge of the manor. You may never travel more than a few miles from where you were born. As the sun lowers in the sky, you guide the oxen back toward the village. Smoke curls from chimneys. Children chase one another in the dirt lane. The church bell rings again, marking the end of the working day. Inside your cottage, you repair a wooden tool handle by firelight. Your wife spins wool into thread, her hands moving with practiced repetition. The children drowse nearby. There is no newspaper to alarm you, no glowing screen to demand attention. No distant crisis intrudes upon this small room. The peace you experience is not the absence of hardship but the presence of limits. Your responsibilities are clear. Your world is bounded. And yet, beneath this apparent calm, forces are gathering that will soon reshape village life in ways you cannot imagine. Within a few decades, a catastrophe will arrive that alters the balance between lord and laborer, between land and life itself. As you lie down to sleep, listening to the soft breathing of your family and the faint rustle of animals beyond the partition, you cannot know that the quiet rhythm of your fields is fragile. What happens when a peaceful, predictable world is interrupted by something entirely beyond its understanding? You wake again before dawn as you always have. The habits of the body do not change easily. The oxen still need feeding. The hens still scratch at the earth. The bell of the parish church still tolls over the fields of England. But something feels different now. At first it arrives as rumor, quiet, uncertain, carried along the same slow paths as traders and pilgrims. There is talk of a sickness across the sea, ships docking in ports with crews already ill, towns where entire households have fallen silent. You do not know the names of the distant places. You do not need to. They are far away. Yet far away has a way of becoming near. In the 1340s, Europe was tightly connected by trade routes, even if your village felt isolated. Wool from English sheep traveled to continental markets. Merchants passed through towns like London and Bristol, carrying goods and unknowingly something else. The illness that would come to be known as the Black Death moved invisibly at first. Fleas carried by rats, rats carried by ships, ships carried by trade. It required no army, no proclamation. You do not understand bacteria. You do not know the word pandemic. What you know is this: people begin to fall ill. It starts in towns. Word reaches your manor that in larger settlements, carts are moving through the streets collecting bodies. Priests are overwhelmed. Entire families are gone within days. The symptoms are frightening fever, weakness, painful swellings in the armpits and groin. You listen to these reports with unease. But life in the village cannot stop because of rumor. The fields must still be plowed. The animals must still be tended. Then one morning, the miller's wife does not appear at the well. By afternoon, you hear that she is feverish. By the next day, the priest has visited her cottage twice. Within a week, she is buried in the churchyard. There is no dramatic announcement, no clear beginning, just absence. The illness spreads unevenly. Some houses are untouched, others lose multiple members. You begin to notice how quiet certain lanes have become. Doors remain closed. Smoke does not rise from some chimneys. You feel fear, but it is a muted kind of fear. There is little you can do to alter events. There are no instructions from authorities about sanitation or isolation. The priest urges prayer. Some whisper that it is punishment from God. Others blame foul air or distant foreigners. You continue your routine, because routine is all you have. The paradox of the plague years is this: while suffering increases, certain burdens begin to loosen. Before the sickness, your labor obligations to the Lord were fixed and heavy. You owed days each week working the domain, the Lord's own fields, before tending your own strips. You paid rents in grain or coin. You asked permission to marry or move. But as the plague takes hold, something shifts. There are fewer hands in the fields. The open field system depends on cooperation. It requires many workers to plow, sow, and harvest efficiently. Now, strips lie untilled because entire families are gone. Oxen wander without guidance. Weeds grow thick where barley should stand. The Lord cannot harvest crops without laborers, and laborers are suddenly scarce. In the years following the initial outbreak, perhaps as much as 1/3 or even half of the population of England perishes. Exact numbers are debated by historians, but the demographic shock is undeniable. You begin to notice subtle changes. The steward of the manor becomes less strict about attendance. He cannot afford to alienate the workers who remain. There is quiet negotiation where once there was command. Some laborers from neighboring villages begin to move in search of better terms. Before, leaving the manor without permission could result in fines or punishment. Now, lords compete quietly for workers. Wages once tightly controlled begin to rise. In 1351, the Crown attempts to halt this trend with the Statute of Laborers, issued under Edward III. The law tries to freeze wages at pre-plague levels and restrict worker mobility. But laws written in Westminster cannot easily reshape the new reality in rural villages. You may not know the name of the statute, but you feel its tension. Officials attempt to enforce old rates, yet enforcement is uneven. The simple fact remains, fewer people are alive to work the land. In your own household, perhaps you have lost a sibling or a parent. Grief is real and heavy, but so too is a strange, unsettling quiet. There are fewer children running through the lanes, fewer voices at Sunday Mass. The churchyard grows crowded with fresh mounds of earth. And yet for those who survive, daily life grows different. You may find that you have inherited additional strips of land from relatives who died. Your holdings expand slightly. With fewer mouths to feed across the village, pressure on resources eases. Some marginal lands are abandoned entirely, allowed to return to pasture or woodland. Meat becomes a bit more common on the table for some families. Livestock, once tightly rationed, are more available. The balance between population and resources shifts in favor of the living. This is not prosperity in a modern sense. It is not comfort free from hardship, but it is a loosening of constraints that had tightened for generations. You still wake at dawn, you still plow and sow, but you may work fewer days on the Lord's land than before. You may bargain more confidently. The sense of rigid hierarchy softens slightly, not because of ideology, but because of mathematics. The plague also changes your relationship to time and faith. When death is so visible, the urgency of salvation intensifies. Some become more devout, attending Mass with greater fervor. Others grow quietly skeptical, wondering why prayer did not spare their loved ones. The church itself is strained. So many priests die that replacements are often hastily trained. The authority of religious institutions wavers just slightly in the eyes of some villagers. Yet for you, daily rituals remain anchors. You still observe Lent. You still celebrate Easter. You still gather for harvest festivals when the season allows. There is something profoundly human in this persistence. Even as catastrophe reshapes society, the small actions of daily survival continue. Repairing fences, sharpening scythes, baking bread. You may notice that silence now carries a different quality. Before, it was the peaceful quiet of routine. Now, it sometimes feels like absence, like something missing. In the evenings, by the hearth, stories are told of those who have passed. Their names are spoken so they are not forgotten. Memory becomes a kind of inheritance. And beneath it all, a subtle question begins to form in the collective mind of villagers across England. If so many have died, and if the world has not ended, then what truly binds us to the old arrangements? Why must a laborer remain tied to a single manor? Why must rents remain fixed at levels set when land was scarce and people abundant? These questions are not shouted. They are not written in pamphlets. They are felt quietly, like a change in weather. As the 1350s turn into the 1360s, a generation grows up that does not remember life before the plague. For them, higher wages and improved bargaining power are normal. Expectations begin to shift. The Lord still lives in his manor house. The church still stands. The fields still stretch outward in familiar strips. From a distance, the village looks much the same. But beneath the surface, the social fabric has been rewoven. You lie down at night, listening again to the soft sounds of animals and family. The world is still small. The boundaries of your life remain visible, yet something fundamental has changed. You now possess, perhaps for the first time in generations, a measure of leverage. Peace has returned in a muted way. The initial terror has passed. Crops grow again. Children are born again. But peace built upon upheaval is rarely permanent. As memories of the plague fade and authorities attempt to reassert control through taxes, through wage restrictions, through renewed demands, tensions begin to simmer. What happens when ordinary villagers, accustomed to a little more freedom, are asked to return to the old constraints. The years after the great sickness settle into something that feels almost steady again. You rise at dawn. You tend the strips of land that now seem slightly wider than before. You notice that your children eat a little better than you did in your own youth. There is more pasture available. Wages, though contested, are often higher in practice than they once were. From a distance, rural England appears to have returned to its familiar rhythm: fields in neat strips, smoke from thatched roofs, the parish church at the center of village life. But beneath this surface calm, pressures are building in ways that are slow, almost imperceptible at first. The Crown's attempts to restrain wages through the Statute of Laborers have not entirely succeeded. Enforcement varies from manor to manor. Some lords are pragmatic. They recognize the new reality. Without workers, land is useless. Others cling rigidly to the old expectations, imposing fines or seeking to punish those who demand higher pay. At the same time, royal taxation increases. The kingdom remains engaged in the long conflict known as the 100 Years' War. Wars are expensive. Armies must be supplied. Ships must be maintained. Coin must be found. So the crown turns, again and again, to taxation. In 1377, 1379, and 1381, poll taxes are levied flat taxes imposed on individuals rather than on land or goods. Unlike earlier feudal dues, these taxes fall broadly across the population, including peasants who have only recently begun to experience a modest improvement in their bargaining power. You feel the burden directly. The tax collector arrives with lists and demands. The amount may not seem enormous to modern eyes, but to you it represents days of labor, perhaps the difference between security and vulnerability. What makes it sharper is the memory of recent change. You have lived through a time when your work became more valuable. You have tasted a small measure of autonomy. Now, authorities seek to tighten their grip again. Resentment does not erupt immediately. It rarely does. It gathers slowly at the alehouse, at the edge of the fields, in murmured conversations after Mass. In 1381, tension spills over into what historians call the Peasants' Revolt. You may not have thought of yourself as a rebel. You are a farmer, a parent, a neighbor. But when word spreads that villagers in Essex and Kent are refusing tax collectors, something stirs. Men gather. Names circulate. One of them is Wat Tyler, a figure who emerges from relative obscurity to lead thousands toward London. Another name travels with the crowds: John Ball, a radical priest whose sermons question the naturalness of hierarchy itself. He is said to have asked, "When Adam delved and Eve span, who was then the gentleman?" It is a simple question, but in your world it is a dangerous one. The revolt is not purely violent chaos, as later chroniclers sometimes portray it. It carries specific demands: an end to serfdom, fair rents, freedom to move and work without arbitrary restriction. For a brief moment, it seems as though the old order might truly crack. Rebels enter London. Government buildings are attacked. Officials associated with harsh taxation are targeted. The young king, Richard II, only 14 years old, meets the rebels outside the city at Smithfield. There, negotiations falter. Wat Tyler is killed. Accounts vary as to exactly how, and without his leadership, the uprising begins to fragment. Promises made by the king are soon withdrawn. Royal authority reasserts itself. If you took part, perhaps you return to your village quietly, uncertain of what will follow. Some participants are punished. Others are spared. The revolt, in immediate terms, fails to secure its sweeping demands. And yet, something irreversible has occurred. The idea that peasants could organize, march, and articulate political demands has entered the historical record. Even though the revolt is suppressed, it reveals how deeply the social landscape has shifted since the plague. Over the following decades, the institution of serfdom continues to weaken, not because of a single decree, but because economic reality makes it increasingly impractical. Lords find it more efficient to lease land for money rents rather than demand labor services. A cash economy slowly expands. By the early 15th century, many peasants are no longer legally bound in the same way their grandparents were. The transformation is gradual, uneven, and incomplete but real. From your perspective, the changes may feel subtle rather than revolutionary. You still work hard. You still depend on harvests and weather. You still live in a timber house with a thatched roof. But your relationship to the land is shifting from obligation toward contract. And through it all, the daily rhythm continues. You wake at dawn. You walk the familiar path to your strips of land. You feel the weight of the plow handles in your palms. The seasons turn with reassuring regularity, even as political structures evolve. There is a kind of peace in this repetition. It is not the peace of comfort or luxury. It is the peace of embeddedness. You belong to a place. Your identity is intertwined with soil, parish, and kin. The scale of your world is human-sized. You know the faces around you. You understand the expectations placed upon you. Modern life often measures progress in terms of speed, expansion, and choice. Your world measures it differently, in stable harvests, healthy livestock, surviving children. And yet, we must be careful not to romanticize too fully. Your life is constrained. Opportunities are limited. Medical knowledge is rudimentary. A single failed harvest can still bring hunger. Women's roles are tightly defined. Social mobility, though slightly improved, remains narrow. Peace in your village is built on familiarity and limit, but also on inequality and vulnerability. Still, there is something undeniably steady about the cadence of your days. Work and rest are interwoven with religious observance. Community is not optional, it is necessary. The boundaries of your experience shield you from the constant influx of distant anxieties. You are not bombarded by news of conflicts on other continents. You do not compare your life to strangers across the globe. Your expectations are shaped by what you see around you, not by images projected from afar. In the centuries that follow, England will change dramatically. Enclosure movements will break apart the open field system. Fields will be hedged and privatized. Common lands once shared for grazing will shrink. Many rural laborers will eventually migrate toward towns and, later, factories. The quiet world of scattered strips and cooperative plowing will slowly disappear. But in your lifetime, standing at the edge of the 14th century, you inhabit a moment of transition. You have seen catastrophe. You have witnessed hierarchy bend under demographic pressure. You have watched ordinary villagers assert themselves, however briefly. You have also experienced long stretches of uneventful, repetitive days, defined not by headlines but by furrows in soil. As you lie down at night, the fire fatting to embers, you listen again to the small sounds of your household. Outside, the fields rest under starlight. The village is quiet not because nothing has happened, but because history often moves most powerfully in silence. The peaceful rhythm of your life was not free from suffering. It was not untouched by upheaval, yet it was shaped by cycles rather than by constant acceleration. And as later generations leave these fields for crowded cities and mechanized labor, one question lingers quietly in the dark. Was the peace of your bounded, predictable world worth the hardships it carried and what was gained and lost when that world began to dissolve? Story 2. Living by the Nile, ordinary days in an ancient Egyptian farming community. If you stand at the edge of the Nile in ancient times, long before modern dams and concrete embankments, you would first notice the stillness. The river moves, but it does not rush. It glides, broad and patient, reflecting the pale sky above the land of Egypt. On either side of the water stretches a narrow band of green fields of barley and emmer wheat, beyond which lies the vast, silent desert. You live within that narrow band. Without the Nile, there would be no village, no crops, no livestock. Beyond the fertile strip, the earth turns dry and brittle within steps. The desert is not merely nearby, it presses against your world constantly, a reminder that survival depends on the rhythm of the river. You wake before sunrise in a mud brick house with a flat roof. The walls are thick, designed to hold back the heat of the day. The air is cool now, carrying the faint scent of damp earth left behind by the receding floodwaters. Your village stands on slightly elevated ground, safe from the highest inundations. The houses cluster close together, their flat roofs nearly touching. Narrow lanes wind between them. There is no randomness to this placement. Everything is built with the river's behavior in mind. The Nile governs your calendar more precisely than any king. Each year, beginning in summer, the waters rise. This inundation, known in later Greek as the annual flood, deposits a layer of dark silt across the fields. The ancient Egyptians divide their year into 3 seasons: Akhit, flood; Perit, growing; and Shemu, harvest. You do not think of them as abstract seasons, they are lived realities. It is now early in Perit. The flood has receded, leaving behind moist soil rich with nutrients carried from far upstream. Your family's field lies just beyond the village. The boundaries are marked by low, earthen ridges. These ridges help retain water and divide plots allocated by local officials. Land technically belongs to the king, whom you know as the living god, the pharaoh. In your lifetime, perhaps that is Ramesses II, though you will likely never see him. His image may be carved in distant temples, but your direct interaction is with local administrators and scribes. The scribes are important. They measure fields after each flood, recording boundaries and estimating expected yields. Their reed pens scratch across papyrus as they track grain quotas owed to the state. You are a farmer. Your tools are simple: a wooden plow pulled by oxen, sickles edged with flint or bronze, baskets woven from reeds. The plow scratches shallow furrows into the damp soil. Seeds are scattered by hand. It is quiet work. The oxen move slowly. The sun climbs steadily. There is no sudden crisis demanding attention. Instead, the day unfolds in a series of repetitive, deliberate motions: plow, scatter, rake. The predictability of the Nile gives your life a rhythm that feels almost eternal. The river has flooded like this for generations beyond counting. It will flood again next year. You trust it not because you control it, but because it has proven itself reliable. And yet the Nile is not entirely predictable. If the flood is too low, the soil will not receive enough moisture. If it is too high, homes and granaries may be damaged. Your security rests on a balance you cannot command. When you pause at midday, you drink water drawn from a clay jar and eat bread made from emmer wheat. Perhaps there are onions or dried fish. Meals are simple, but they are steady when the harvest is good. Nearby, your children help chase birds away from newly sown fields. Their laughter rises briefly above the low murmur of wind moving through reeds along the riverbank. In the distance, you can see a small shrine dedicated to a local deity. Religion here is woven into daily life. The Nile itself is associated with the god Hapi, bringer of the flood. The cycle of death and rebirth in crops mirrors the story of Osiris, who dies and is reborn. These myths are not distant stories. They are explanations for what you witness each year: dry land submerged, then renewed. Occasionally, officials arrive by boat to inspect the fields. They calculate the portion of grain owed as tax. Grain is not merely food, it is currency. It pays workers, supports temple offerings, and sustains state projects. In some years, you may be called away from your village during the flood season, when farming pauses. The state organizes labor for building projects, canals, temples, even pyramids in earlier centuries. Contrary to later myths, much of this labor is not slave-driven chaos but organized, seasonal work performed by farmers when their fields are underwater. If you lived during the Old Kingdom, Your labor might have contributed to monuments like those at Giza Plateau. In later periods, your work might support temple complexes along the Nile. But these tasks occur within a system that allows you to return home for planting and harvest. The village itself functions cooperatively. Irrigation channels must be maintained, dikes repaired, water distribution carefully monitored. You and your neighbors share responsibility for keeping the system intact. There is little sense of individual isolation here. Survival depends on coordinated effort. As evening approaches, the heat softens. You guide the oxen back toward the village. The sky turns gold over the western desert. That western horizon carries symbolic meaning. It is associated with death, where the sun sets and where many tombs are built. Death is present in your thinking, but it is not necessarily feared as an abrupt end. You believe in an afterlife, a continuation that depends partly on proper burial and moral conduct. Tomb paintings depict scenes of farming, feasting, and family life images meant to sustain the deceased eternally. In your own modest way, you hope for similar continuity. After supper, you sit on the flat roof of your house to catch cooler air. From here, you can see the Nile glinting faintly in the twilight. Boats drift silently. Somewhere, a musician plays a simple reed flute. There is no artificial light beyond oil lamps. The stars emerge clearly, undimmed by city glow. The Milky Way stretches overhead, a pale band across the sky. You do not know its scientific explanation, but you feel its constancy. Modern life often brings noise, mechanical hums, distant traffic, electric signals invisible but omnipresent. Your world is defined instead by natural cycles. Flood and drought, sunrise and sunset, planting and harvest. This does not mean your life is free of hardship. Disease exists here too. Injuries can become fatal without advanced medicine. Drought years bring hunger. Political instability, when it occurs, disrupts tax systems and local governance. Yet for long stretches of time, particularly during stable periods, like parts of the New Kingdom, daily village life remains remarkably consistent. You measure time not by minutes but by shadows, not by deadlines but by seasons. The Nile's annual gift allows for a form of peace rooted in repetition. You do not strive for constant expansion. The goal is balance. Enough grain stored, enough livestock healthy, enough cooperation maintained. As you lie down to sleep, the thick mud brick walls holding the day's warmth, you hear the faint lap of water against the riverbank. You trust that in a few months the flood will return again, renewing the soil. But what happens when that trust is shaken, when the Nile fails to rise as expected, or when political power shifts and the grain you grow is demanded in greater quantities than before? For most of your life, the Nile has been faithful. Each summer, the river rises slowly, spreading across the low fields. Each autumn, it withdraws, leaving behind a dark layer of fertile silt. The pattern feels eternal, so dependable that it shapes your understanding of order itself. In ancient Egypt, order is more than convenience. It is sacred. The concept of Ma'at, balance, harmony, rightful arrangement governs both the cosmos and the kingdom. The pharaoh maintains Ma'at. The Nile expresses it. So when the flood begins to falter, the disturbance is more than agricultural. It begins subtly. One year, the waters do not climb quite as high against the measuring marks carved into stone along the riverbank. Priests and officials watch carefully. Nilometer structures designed to track water levels reveal the truth. The inundation is lower than expected. You stand at the edge of your field and see more dry earth than usual. At first, you tell yourself that next year will be better. The Nile has fluctuated before. But when the pattern repeats, another low flood, another reduced layer of silt, the concern deepens. The soil is less moist, seeds struggle, the yield shrinks. Grain quotas, however, do not always shrink at the same rate. Scribes arrive as they always have. Their role is methodical, precise. They measure your field using cords knotted at intervals. They calculate expected output. Their tablets record what you owe. You attempt to explain that the harvest is smaller. Sometimes they adjust. Sometimes they do not. The state depends on grain not only for local sustenance, but for redistribution to workers, temple personnel, and officials. In years of poor flooding, tension quietly grows between village and administration. You do not think of rebellion. That is not the language of your world, but you feel strain. Your household begins to ration more carefully. Bread loaves are slightly smaller. Fish is salted for longer preservation. Lentils and onions stretch meals further. The cooperative nature of irrigation becomes even more critical. You and your neighbors repair channels with greater urgency, attempting to direct every possible drop of water into your plots. Labor that once felt routine now carries sharper stakes. In prosperous years, surplus grain might be stored in communal granaries, large mud-brick structures designed to keep rodents out and dryness in. In lean years, those reserves are opened carefully. Distribution must be measured to prevent depletion before the next harvest. The temple in your district becomes a focal point for prayer and petition. Offerings to deities associated with fertility and inundation increase. Happy, spirit of the Nile flood, receives renewed attention. So does Osiris, whose cyclical death and rebirth mirrors the agricultural year. But prayer alone cannot raise the river. In certain historical periods, prolonged low floods contribute to wider instability. During the end of the Old Kingdom, centuries before your lifetime, a series of insufficient inundations likely played a role in political fragmentation. Central authority weakened. Regional governors gained power. If you live in a later, more stable era, perhaps under a ruler like Ramesses II, the administrative system is stronger, more capable of absorbing fluctuation. But even strong systems strain under environmental stress. You begin to notice small changes in the village. A family from farther upriver arrives, seeking better conditions. They report that their fields have suffered repeated failures. Migration within the Nile Valley is not uncommon in difficult years. The river connects communities physically and economically. Their arrival is both burden and benefit. More mouths to feed, but also more hands to repair dikes and clear canals. One evening, you sit on your roof and look west toward the desert. The wind carries fine sand across the horizon. The desert is always there, patient, waiting. Without the Nile's annual renewal, it would reclaim everything. The fragility of your world becomes clearer in lean years. Yet something else becomes clearer too: resilience. Ancient Egyptian farming communities developed strategies over centuries precisely because variability exists. Basin irrigation systems, large enclosed areas designed to hold floodwater, allow controlled absorption into soil. Surplus storage systems buffer against shortfalls. You and your neighbors have inherited not only land, but accumulated knowledge. You know which crops tolerate drier soil. Barley may fare better than emmer in certain conditions. You adjust planting density. You repair tools carefully to avoid waste. Livestock are managed conservatively. Fewer animals are slaughtered when fodder is uncertain. The rhythm of life slows further not out of tranquility, but caution. Children who once played freely in harvested fields now assist more actively in guarding grain stores. Elders recall stories of previous lean years and emphasize patience. The pharaoh, distant yet symbolically central, remains the guarantor of order. Official inscriptions, carved into temple walls in places like Thebes, speak of abundance and divine favor. These messages reinforce stability even when reality is uneven. For you, stability is measured less in inscriptions and more in the fullness of storage jars. There is no sense of constant external comparison. You do not see images of faraway lands flourishing while yours struggles. Your horizon is local, bounded by river and desert. That boundedness tempers anxiety. Even in lean years, the Nile Valley rarely descends into complete chaos. The river still flows, the sun still rises, the agricultural cycle continues, even if diminished. And then, as suddenly as it seemed to falter, the flood returns stronger. One year the water climbs higher against the Nilometer. It spills generously across basins. The silt layer is thick and dark again. Fields drink deeply. You feel relief, not dramatic joy, but a steady easing of tension. Seeds sprout vigorously. Grain heads swell under the sun. The harvest is good. In prosperous seasons following hardship, gratitude carries a quieter tone. You remember the uncertainty. You store surplus carefully. You repair granaries in anticipation of future variability. This oscillation between plenty and caution becomes part of your mental landscape. Peace, in this context, is not the absence of risk. It is the presence of a system, natural and social, that absorbs risk without collapsing entirely. As the years pass, children grow into adults who have experienced both scarcity and abundance. Their expectations are shaped by cycles, not linear progress. Modern societies often pursue endless growth, more production, more speed, more accumulation. Your society seeks equilibrium. Too much flood is dangerous. Too little flood is dangerous. The goal is balance. At night, lying on a woven mat beneath the open sky, you listen to insects humming along the riverbank. The Nile reflects the moon in a thin, wavering line. You think not in decades, but in seasons. Yet beyond your village, political dynamics continue to evolve. Dynasties rise and fall. Foreign powers occasionally threaten borders. Trade routes expand, bringing goods and ideas from distant lands. The same river that sustains your peace also connects you to wider forces. What happens when those wider forces, ambition, invasion, shifting dynasties, reach even this carefully balanced farming community? The Nile rises again. Not dramatically, not catastrophically, just enough. You stand at the edge of the basin walls as water slowly spreads across the fields, filling the shallow enclosures your village has maintained for generations. The movement is almost silent. Muddy water slides into channels cut by hands long dead, guided by ridges shaped and reshaped over centuries. In ancient Egypt, survival has never depended on sudden invention. It depends on continuity. You have lived through years when the flood faltered and years when it returned strong. You have seen how delicate the balance is, but you have also witnessed how deeply rooted the system is, how knowledge, custom, and cooperation reinforce one another. Now, as the inundation settles into a familiar pattern again, your village exhales. The scribes arrive as usual when the waters recede. They measure the fields, adjusting boundaries where the flood has shifted soil. Their presence is calm, procedural. The state still claims its share, but in good years the share feels less suffocating. Grain fills storage jars. The communal granary grows heavy with promise. Yet beyond your immediate horizon, the political landscape is shifting. If you live in the later New Kingdom, the reign of Ramesses II has projected strength through monumental architecture and military campaigns. Temples rise in places like Thebes, their columns carved with scenes of triumph and divine favor. But even great reigns end. Dynasties turn over. Court politics grow complex. Foreign influences increase along Egypt's borders. Trade with the eastern Mediterranean expands, bringing cedar wood, copper, incense, and occasionally instability. To you, these developments register faintly at first. A new overseer is appointed in your district. A different seal marks official documents. The name of the ruling pharaoh changes in temple prayers. The river still floods. But gradually, as centuries move forward, the centralized control that once defined Egypt begins to loosen. regional administrators gain more autonomy. Temple institutions accumulate land and wealth. In some periods, such as the Third Intermediate Period, political authority fragments. For a farming family like yours, fragmentation can have mixed effects. On one hand, local control sometimes means more flexibility. Decisions are made closer to home. On the other hand, competing authorities can demand overlapping obligations, taxes to one power, labor to another. You notice subtle changes in how grain is collected. The efficiency of redistribution fluctuates. In some years, canals are maintained meticulously. In others, repairs lag. The peace you experience has always depended on layers of coordination: natural, social, political. When any layer weakens, the strain travels downward. Still, daily life retains its essential pattern. You wake before dawn. You guide oxen through damp soil. You watch your children grow into their roles, one learning to handle irrigation gates, another practicing careful tallying under the watchful eye of a village scribe. Your daughter grinds grain between heavy stones, her rhythm steady and practiced. Her labor is repetitive but skilled. She understands by feel when flour is fine enough. In the evenings, you share stories that blend myth and memory. You speak of Happy and the life-giving flood. You recount how your father survived a low-water year through careful storage. You point toward the western horizon, explaining why tombs face the setting sun. The continuity of story becomes as important as the continuity of water. Then, one year, strangers arrive in larger numbers than usual. They are traders, at first speaking unfamiliar dialects, wearing slightly different garments. They bring goods from regions beyond your experience. Over time, such interactions increase. Egypt's relative isolation begins to soften. In later centuries, foreign powers will exert direct control. The Persians will conquer Egypt. Later still, the campaigns of Alexander the Great will bring Greek rule. Eventually, Roman authority will extend over the Nile Valley. But from your vantage point, such transformations do not arrive overnight. They filter slowly into rural life. A new administrative language may appear in official records. Coinage becomes more common in certain periods, supplementing grain-based exchange. Soldiers from distant lands may pass along the riverbanks. And yet, through each regime change, the river continues its ancient motion. This is perhaps the most striking feature of your world. Political authority is powerful, but ecological rhythm is more enduring. Under Persian rule, grain still grows in Nile-fed soil. Under Greek administrators, irrigation canals still require clearing. Under Roman taxation systems, farmers still watch the nilometer anxiously each summer. Your peace has never been the peace of isolation from power. It has been the peace of repetition within power's shadow. In some eras, taxation intensifies to support distant imperial ambitions. Roman authorities, for example, rely heavily on Egyptian grain to feed populations in cities like Rome itself. Increased demand can strain rural producers. But even then, your strategies remain grounded in local knowledge. You adjust planting patterns. You rely on extended kin networks. You store surplus when possible. You endure lean cycles with caution. What distinguishes your life from many modern ones is not the absence of pressure, but the predictability of its sources. You do not face hourly fluctuations in markets. You are not subject to constant streams of information. Your concerns are tangible: water level, soil quality, tool durability, communal cooperation. There is a mental spaciousness in that tangibility. As you grow older, you realize that your life has been measured not by dramatic turning points, but by accumulations of ordinary days. The sound of wind in papyrus reeds, the weight of wet mud between your toes, the warm, yeasty scent of bread emerging from a clay oven, the glow of oil lamps flickering against mud brick walls. Your grandchildren will inherit this same narrow strip of green between river and desert. They will inherit the same anxiety each summer as water levels rise or fail to rise. They will inherit the same stories linking the flood to divine order. Centuries may pass, pharaohs may change, empires may rise and fall. But the farmer at the river's edge remains. Eventually, modern engineering will attempt to control the Nile entirely. Dams will regulate its flow. The ancient cycle of natural inundation will be altered permanently. The predictable flood that once renewed soil without machinery will become a managed event. From one perspective, that represents progress, greater stability, more consistent crop yields, protection from extreme floods. From another perspective, something ancient is lost: the intimate negotiation between human community and natural rhythm. As you lie on your roof one final evening, listening to the river's steady current, you understand peace not as perfection, but as alignment. Alignment between season and labor, between community and necessity, between expectation and reality. Your world is not free from hardship. It contains hunger, hierarchy, and vulnerability, but it also contains limits, clear boundaries that define responsibility and reduce distraction. The Nile has taught you patience. And as later generations chase growth, expansion, and technological mastery, one quiet question lingers along the riverbank. When we replace natural rhythms with engineered certainty, do we gain security, or do we lose the kind of peace that comes from living within cycles older than memory? Story 3. Wintering in silence, daily survival in a Norse settlement in Greenland. Imagine the northern reaches of the North Atlantic. Vast, icy seas stretch endlessly, dotted with jagged rocks and the occasional glint of floating ice. The wind carries a cold bite that seems to seep into bones, and the sun arcs low across the horizon, barely lifting before it dips again. This is southern Greenland in the late 10th century, during the Norse expansion to the edge of the known world. You live in one of the small settlements established by families who left Iceland generations earlier. Your ancestors sought new grazing lands, pastures for cattle, and isolation from crowded fjords back home. At first glance, your village seems impossibly small against the vast, frozen landscape. A handful of turf houses clustered together, with smoke rising from low chimneys, and storage sheds for hay and tools pressed close to the windward sides. Your house is built low and thick, walls of turf and stone packed together to hold warmth. A central hearth glows dimly against the early morning darkness. The roof is reinforced with layers of sod, held down by driftwood or rocks. Inside, the floor is lined with straw for insulation. You share this cramped space with family and perhaps a few domesticated animals: goats, sheep, maybe a cow if the winter has been kind. Space is tight, and yet the closeness provides warmth that is crucial for survival. The day begins long before sunrise. There is no rooster to crow here, only the occasional bleat of a goat or the sigh of a wind gust through the nearby cliffs. You lift your hand from under furs and feel the chill of the turf walls. Frost may coat the floor. The first task is always fire. Logs are scarce, and driftwood may have been gathered weeks ago and carefully rationed. You strike flint, coax sparks onto tinder, and slowly bring warmth to the hearth. Food is scarce and calculated. A portion of yesterday's salted fish, perhaps a small piece of dried meat, oatmeal from stored grains, and milk if the animals are productive. Every calorie counts. Waste is not an option. Modern supermarkets do not exist. Every morsel in the storage pit, every preserved fish or fermented whey is precious. Outside, the wind winds across the low hills. Snow may be falling. The light is dim, a gray pall that never fully brightens. You know that the hours will pass slowly. Winter in Greenland is not a season to conquer. It is a season to endure. Your neighbors are close not only physically but socially. Survival depends on cooperation, sharing labor to repair roofs, distributing food when a family's supply runs low, helping guide a herd through deep snow. These are matters of life and death. Solitude can be fatal. Silence in isolation is the enemy here. You attend to your livestock first. Sheep huddle in sheltered pens, goats press against each other for warmth. If you are lucky, the cow gives a little milk. You move slowly, conserving energy. Every movement costs calories that cannot easily be replaced. After tending animals, you repair tools. Wooden plows, iron-tipped axes, and knives worn thin from repeated sharpening demand attention. A snapped handle or dull blade could jeopardize your survival in days to come. Communication is deliberate. The Norse language carries concise instruction. Words are exchanged sparingly. There is little room for idle chatter when the wind bites and your body demands energy for work. But when stories are told, they matter. Tales of Leif Erikson reaching Vinland circulate during long nights, inspiring dreams beyond the ice fields. These stories are told not for drama, but to remember where the community came from, what courage looks like, and what endurance means. Meals are functional. Bread may be coarse, made from stored barley. Fish is salted or dried. Occasionally, a small piece of meat roasted over the hearth is divided among the household. There is no luxury, no distraction, no variety, only the careful allocation of nourishment. The day is punctuated not by timepieces but by activity. Feed animals, repair shelter, maintain fire, observe the horizon for signs of the weather changing. The harsh environment leaves no margin for error. Evenings stretch long, darkness arrives early. The wind howls. Children sit close to the hearth, perhaps learning to spin wool or mend garments. You may recount the years hunting patterns, describe which seals have appeared along the coast, or instruct the young on reading the sky for storms. Practical knowledge is essential. Entertainment is secondary. And yet there is a quiet rhythm in this repetition. Survival tasks, though laborious, are predictable. They bind your day to a pattern that is reliable, even when the landscape itself is brutal and unpredictable. In this way, your life has a strange, meditative quality. The hardships are constant, yes, but so is the clarity of purpose. Outside the village, glaciers loom and fjords remain frozen much of the year. Travel is dangerous. Hunting requires preparation and caution. The settlement is largely self-contained. The world beyond these coasts exists in stories and rare visitors, but for most of your life, the horizon is an edge, not a doorway. And yet, as the long night settles in, a question lingers in every mind. Will the livestock survive this winter? Will the stored food suffice until spring? Will the village endure another year of darkness and cold? The answers are uncertain, and that uncertainty, tempered by careful planning and strict routine, is the heartbeat of your existence. Winter in Greenland is not measured in days but in the slow passage of light. Dawn comes late, lingering in gray, dim sheets, and dusk arrives just as quickly, folding the landscape back into shadow. For months, the sun hovers low on the horizon, and sometimes it vanishes entirely. You awaken in darkness, eat in darkness, and work mostly by the faint glow of hearth fires or drifting moonlight. Your survival depends on structure. The work of daily life is deliberate and repetitive. You tend animals multiple times each day. The cows need feeding, the sheep must be checked for frostbite, the goats require constant attention to prevent escape into snowdrifts. Each animal represents food, milk, wool, or labor. A loss could mean weeks of hardship. Food management has become a science in itself. Grain from the last summer's harvest is rationed carefully. Every handful of oats, barley, or dried peas is measured. Salted fish is preserved for emergencies. Fat is saved for cooking, not burning in the fire for warmth. Any miscalculation could threaten life before the next thaw. Outside, the frozen landscape is deceptive. Drift ice and hidden crevices make travel dangerous. Hunting and foraging are essential but perilous. Seal hunts along the coast require patience, skill, and knowledge of tidal patterns. Snowstorms arrive suddenly, often without warning. A single day's misjudgment could leave you stranded or exposed to frostbite. Community ties are indispensable. Families cooperate, constantly exchanging labor, sharing firewood, helping repair homes battered by winter storms. If one family fails, the surrounding households feel the ripple effects. Your social cohesion is as vital as your physical stores of food and fuel. Evenings are long, sometimes spanning nearly 12 hours of darkness. You sit close to the hearth, tending its embers and conserving heat. There is little room for idleness. Children spin wool, mend clothing, or practice the rudimentary reading and numeracy skills passed down by the older generation. Storytelling fills in the quiet spaces, tales of distant lands, of voyages beyond the ice, of the exploits of Eric the Red, the founder of your settlement. These stories teach endurance, caution, and community responsibility as much as they entertain. Winter also teaches humility. You respect the limits imposed by nature. You learn to accept that you cannot control the cold, the winds, or the frozen seas. Instead, you adjust, prepare, and wait. There is no dramatic heroism in your days. Survival is incremental, mending the roof, preserving the grain, maintaining the fire, guiding the animals safely through another night. Yet even within this constant struggle, small victories are celebrated quietly. A cow giving milk despite frostbitten hooves, a fish successfully caught through ice, a repaired roof that withstands the wind. These are achievements of survival, as meaningful as any battlefield conquest. Religion, ritual, and belief provide structure as well. You honor the gods and spirits of land and sea. Offerings may be made to ensure continued fertility of the soil or abundance of the hunt. The rhythms of the Norse calendar, marked by festivals such as Yule, give spiritual scaffolding to the physical labor. Faith is practical and intertwined with survival. Communication with distant settlements is rare, but letters or visitors bring news of other Greenlandic farms, of shortages, of occasional success. Tales of famine or abundant harvests from more temperate lands are whispered across fjords. These accounts influence decisions: how much food to store, whether to send young men on hunting expeditions, whether to make repairs before a predicted storm. Despite isolation, you are part of a broader network of survival knowledge stretching across generations. Techniques for preserving fish, drying meat, storing grain, and insulating homes are refined over decades. Mistakes are costly but instructive. Lessons learned during one winter inform decisions for the next. Still, no amount of preparation can remove the underlying uncertainty. Each winter brings the same questions. Will the livestock endure? Will the stored food suffice? Will storms destroy the fragile shelters? This uncertainty shapes your perception of time. You measure it by cycles of survival rather than abstract calendars. Months are felt in layers of frost, in the thickness of stored fodder, in the survival of family members. The extended darkness also sharpens observation. You notice details that might be ignored in brighter climates: the way ice forms along the riverbank, the smell of snow indicating approaching wind, the subtle changes in animal behavior predicting storms. Each observation is a survival tool. In this environment, patience is a skill as necessary as strength. You pace yourself physically, mentally, and emotionally. Energy is preserved, arguments are minimal, and tasks are prioritized. You understand that overexertion is as dangerous as inattention. The rhythm of survival is deliberate and slow, sometimes painfully so. And yet there is a certain serenity in this monotony. The repetition of necessary tasks creates a meditative cadence. The long nights allow for reflection, quiet teaching, and storytelling. You experience the seasons fully, intimately. The contrast between scarcity and survival fosters appreciation for each successful day, for the smallest comforts: a dry coat, a warm hearth, a meal shared with family. This existence is far from the bustling life of Bergen or the excitement of distant Vinland. It is quiet, constrained, and dangerous. Yet, it is also structured, intelligible, and survivable. As winter stretches into months, You lie awake in the hearth's glow, listening to the wind rattle the turf roofs. You know spring will eventually come, and the ice will retreat. Life will resume in longer days, grazing animals will eat fresh grass, and the work of planting and preparing for the next winter will begin anew. But the memory of the long night endures. It reminds you of vulnerability, the limits of human control, and the necessity of reliance on others. And a question lingers as you drift into uneasy sleep. When the world outside your small settlement is growing, changing, and exploring, how long can such fragile, isolated communities endure without the wider support that you barely see but instinctively depend upon? Winter at last loosens its grip. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the nights begin to shorten. The horizon lightens earlier, and the sun lingers just a little longer. Ice begins to fracture along the fjords, driftwood moves with the gentle current, and the scent of thawed earth rises faintly from the edges of snow-covered fields. You emerge from your turf house with cautious optimism. The animals have survived, though some are weaker than last year. The stored grain is low but sufficient. Each small success feels like a quiet triumph, not a cause for celebration, but a relief measured in calories, warmth, and physical endurance. The thaw brings work. Paths must be cleared of ice and snow. Dikes and fences repaired before animals venture into spring pastures. Roofs patched and fortified after months of wind and frost. You and your neighbors labor side by side, aware that failure in any task could ripple into catastrophe. Cooperation remains central. Survival is still communal. With longer days, you begin hunting again along the coast. Seals haul out on ice floes. Birds return in small numbers. Fishing through holes in the thawing ice becomes feasible. These activities supplement the meager stores and allow families to restock supplies for the coming year. Even when the work is mundane, there is a sense of agency absent during the endless winter. You can shape your immediate environment and influence your own survival in tangible ways. Children, once confined to chores within the walls during winter, now follow their elders to tend animals or gather firewood. They learn to read the landscape, where snow hides crevices, which ice patches are safe, where driftwood may be collected. Knowledge accumulated over generations is passed along, slowly but deliberately. Survival here is cultural as much as physical. During evenings, stories continue but their function shifts. Winter tales of hardship are now contrasted with accounts of endurance and practical advice. Lessons learned through scarcity are retold to prepare the young for future hardships. You speak of storms survived, livestock preserved, and community efforts that averted disaster. These stories reinforce the interdependence that underpins life in such a harsh land. Amid the physical recovery, you reflect on your broader place in the world. The Norse settlements in Greenland exist at the margins of known civilization. Traders, occasional visitors, and distant explorers are glimpses of a wider world. But for most of your life, that world feels distant, abstract, and unconnected. Even as European powers rise and cities flourish far away, your reality is local, bounded by fjord, ice, and horizon. Yet this isolation is both protective and limiting. You are shielded from some of the political upheavals and conflicts elsewhere, but your community is vulnerable to local disasters. A failed harvest, a severe storm, or disease can have immediate and devastating consequences. Your survival is not guaranteed, and the knowledge of that fragility shapes the rhythm of your life. Measured, careful, deliberate. Spring progresses, and with it, a renewed sense of possibility. The ice breaks fully along the fjords, the soil softens, and pastures become available for grazing. You plant early crops where soil is thawed, and animals are let out to forage. Every task, though simple, carries the weight of preparation and the promise of future sustenance. From your perspective, history is not recorded in grand events or distant conquests. It is inscribed in the cycles of the seasons, in the survival of family and community, and in the quiet victories of everyday labor. The Norse settlers, Efforts to endure here may seem minor compared to the great expansions across the Atlantic, but they are no less significant to those who live them. This way of life teaches resilience, patience, and respect for natural limits. Modern observers might marvel at the daring voyages of your contemporaries to Vinland or the administrative power of kings elsewhere, but you understand that survival itself is an achievement. The ordinary acts of endurance, tending livestock, repairing structures, conserving food, are the threads that hold society together at the edge of the known world. You recognize, too, that time has a different quality here. Days are measured not by calendars or clocks, but by labor and light. Seasons mark life more reliably than distant events. Your expectations, joys, and fears are shaped by tangible realities: frost, snow, water, wind, and the health of your community. And yet, even in this isolation, you are not untouched by the wider world. Visitors arrive occasionally, rumors travel across ice and fjord, and distant events, wars, trade, or exploration carry implications, however faint. They remind you that your settlement, while marginal, exists within a broader human network, connected in ways that are subtle but real. As the thaw deepens, you sit on the roof of your turf house in the cool evening air. The sun dips gently over the horizon, casting long shadows across the snow-mottled landscape. You watch your children tending animals, your neighbors repairing fences, the slow but steady return of life to the frozen land. The long winter is behind you, but its lessons remain. Patience, cooperation, careful observation, and respect for the limits imposed by nature have become ingrained in your family and community. Peace here is quiet and measured, earned through endurance rather than imposed or granted. And as you contemplate the fragile balance between human effort and the indifferent forces of nature, one thought lingers. For how long can this delicate equilibrium persist? And what will be lost when outside pressures, climate, distant trade, or changing governance eventually reach even this isolated edge of the world? Story 4. The slow hours of Edo daily life in a Japanese samurai town. Imagine waking in a narrow wooden house with sliding paper doors, the scent of tatami mats mingling with the faint aroma of cooked rice. You live in Edo, the heart of the Edo period, a city that has grown from a modest castle town into a sprawling hub of political and cultural life. The streets are narrow and winding, lined with wooden shops, merchants, stalls, and residences for samurai, artisans, and commoners alike. You are the household steward for a lower-ranking samurai family. Your responsibilities are quiet but constant: maintaining the home, ensuring food is prepared, managing small errands, and preserving the subtle hierarchy that governs every interaction. Though your life is confined within walls, courtyards, and neighborhoods, the rhythm is steady and disciplined, shaped by custom, obligation, and the unyielding cadence of Edo society. Morning begins before sunrise. Sliding doors creak as you rise, wash with cold water in the basin, and light a small charcoal brazier. Tea is prepared with deliberate care, each movement mindful and exact. The household awakens slowly. The young samurai dons his uniform, the mistress arranges her kimono, and servants like you move in quiet synchronicity to prepare breakfast: rice, miso soup, pickled vegetables, and occasionally fish or tofu. Edo is a city of order, even in its apparent chaos. Streets bustle with vendors, porters, and rickshaw drivers, but everyone knows their place. Social hierarchy is enforced in subtle ways: posture, speech, seating arrangements, and even the colors and patterns of clothing signal status. You navigate these cues constantly, aware that a misstep, even one unnoticed by others, can have consequences for reputation and employment. After breakfast, your day unfolds in measured steps. You inspect storage rooms, ensuring rice and grains are carefully stacked. You sweep the tatami mats, repair minor damage to doors or walls, and oversee apprentices learning basic household duties. Each action is small, repetitive, and meticulous, yet vital to the smooth functioning of the home. Outside the household, Edo is alive with commerce. Market stalls display fruits, vegetables, silk, ceramics, and lacquerware. Merchants shout their wares. The hum of activity is continuous but never chaotic. A tacit order keeps the city functioning. As you perform errands fetching supplies, delivering messages, purchasing necessities, you observe and internalize the patterns. Knowledge of timing, routes, and social expectations is essential. A misjudged arrival could interrupt a samurai's routine, disrupt an official ceremony, or create embarrassment. Lunch is brief, functional, often a simple meal of rice, pickles, and dried fish. There is little idle conversation unless permitted by your superiors. Edo's culture values restraint, modesty, and precision, particularly within samurai households. You learn to anticipate needs before they are voiced. A heated mat, a missing utensil, or a misaligned sliding door. Efficiency is expected, but subtlety is equally prized. Afternoon tasks include monitoring apprentices' training, ensuring proper etiquette is observed, and attending to the family's personal affairs, letters, petitions, or small payments to merchants. Time moves slowly, but the rhythm is clear. Every hour carries predictable work, punctuated by occasional disturbances, an unexpected visitor, a request from a higher-ranking samurai, or a minor household emergency. Each interruption requires calm adjustment. Evening begins as the sun lowers over rooftops. Lamps are lit, bathing the rooms in soft, flickering light. Meals are prepared and eaten with ceremony. Family members retire to rest, and you inspect doors, lock storage chests, and tend the hearth before retiring. Darkness and quiet signal a pause in activity, yet you remain vigilant. Edo may feel orderly, but the city's density and reliance on social structure demand constant attention. Through these slow hours, you notice small patterns. The way light shifts across wooden beams, the rhythm of footsteps on narrow streets, the subtle interactions between merchants and customers. Each observation informs your work. Predictability is survival. Your life is bounded, constrained, and deeply structured, yet within those limits, your skill and attentiveness grant influence and respect. This quiet life is far from dramatic. There are no sweeping conquests, no towering monuments under your supervision, no sudden catastrophes demanding heroism. Yet in its repetition lies a peculiar form of peace. Life is sustained by consistency, hierarchy, and the disciplined practice of daily tasks. You understand the pulse of Edo not through headlines or edicts, but through observation, participation, and subtle adaptation. And as night deepens, sliding doors closed, lanterns glowing softly, and rooftops silent except for the occasional distant chatter, a question lingers. How long can this fragile equilibrium of ritual, hierarchy, and disciplined repetition persist before external pressures, political intrigue, economic shifts, or social unrest reshape the slow, measured life you have come to depend upon? In Edo, the rhythm of daily life is as deliberate as the folding of a kimono, yet just as heavy. Your household operates within a lattice of obligations, each tied to the rigid hierarchy of the Tokugawa period. The samurai class dominates the city, and even minor disruptions can ripple through the web of social expectation. After morning duties, you spend hours tending the subtler demands of the family, supervising apprentices, checking accounts, ensuring that clothing, armor, and personal belongings are meticulously maintained. Every misaligned tatami mat, missing tool, or overlooked document carries significance. Even small errors, unnoticed by others, erode confidence in your skill and attention. The city itself continues its quiet hum outside the household walls. Street vendors push wooden carts laden with rice cakes, pickles, or freshly cut bamboo. Merchants chant, but in a tone that is practiced, controlled. Bridges creak as travelers cross canals, their footsteps timed to avoid collisions. You move through these streets with purpose, a small but essential participant in the city's vast choreography. Lunch is functional steamed rice, pickled vegetables, perhaps a small portion of fish. Conversation is minimal, courteous, restrained. Your role is to observe, anticipate needs, and act before being asked. The line between diligence and overstepping is narrow. Subtlety, observation, and timing are everything. Afternoons stretch into formal inspections and preparation for evening routines. You check lanterns, sweep hallways, polish wooden utensils, and ensure that every aspect of domestic order is maintained. Outside, messengers may arrive with edicts from distant authorities, or a higher-ranking samurai may request a meeting. These interruptions demand immediate, composed response. You begin to notice patterns in the city's energy. Certain districts are quieter in the afternoon. Merchants in one lane pack goods carefully as customers thin. Children weave along canals, learning to navigate the narrow streets. Seasonal festivals punctuate the year, Abendjin and local temple observances, but even these are carefully structured. Community joy is disciplined, ritualized, and framed within expectation. The slow hours reveal something important. Edo's seeming stability is both fragile and resilient. Structure, hierarchy, and repetition maintain order, yet the system depends on everyone understanding their place. A breach, be it a poorly kept account, a disruptive apprentice, or a misdelivered message, can cascade into disorder, however subtly. Even as you manage the household, broader economic forces press invisibly. Rice prices fluctuate based on harvests in distant provinces. Merchants adjust supply and demand with precision. Though your household is relatively insulated, the city's dependence on grain, trade, and labor means that shifts elsewhere eventually reach you. Predictability in life is maintained, but only so long as the broader systems remain stable. Evenings are quiet but meticulous. Meals are prepared and shared according to protocol. You light lanterns and walk through the halls, inspecting the household for order. Doors are closed, items stored, mats aligned. The household itself is a miniature city, self-contained, reliant on strict routine, and dependent on subtle expertise. In these long, repetitive hours, skill and observation carry real weight. You learn to anticipate needs, adjust to minor disruptions, and maintain composure under subtle pressure. The work is physically modest but mentally intensive. Awareness of hierarchy, ritual, and expectation is as vital as sweeping or carrying water. Outside, Edo's sprawling canals, bridges, and streets continue in a coordinated flow. You notice patterns: which vendors arrive at dawn, which canal locks require attention, which intersections are busiest during the tea hour. The city is not chaotic. It is a living, breathing system, delicate yet enduring. Even as peace and order dominate daily life, you are aware of its fragility. Political intrigue, taxation, or a sudden disaster could shift the balance. You see the seeds of future unrest, whispers of dissatisfaction among lower-ranking samurai or merchants, subtle signs of economic strain. And yet there is comfort in repetition. Days are bounded. Obligations are clear. Survival, success, and respect are achievable through attention to detail and steady adherence to routine. The quiet discipline of life here fosters a deep understanding of limits, timing, and measured action. As night deepens, lanterns glow in the soft darkness. You sit on the engawa, the covered veranda, listening to distant footsteps, the hum of the city, and the occasional clatter of merchants preparing for the next day. The city sleeps slowly, predictably, yet with the ever-present possibility of change. You reflect. The slow hours of Edo are not idle. They are deliberate, structured, and essential to maintaining the fragile equilibrium of life in a complex urban center. And one thought lingers as the lantern flickers and shadows deepen. In a society built on hierarchy, discipline, and repetition, what happens when the delicate balance is disturbed by greed, misfortune, or ambition, and the slow rhythm is shattered? The sun sets slowly over Edo, casting long shadows across narrow streets and canal bridges. Lanterns begin to glow along wooden facades, their light flickering against the paper screens of homes. You walk along the engawa of your household, observing the city in its ordered state. From this vantage, it is clear that Edo is a network of interdependent routines. Merchants prepare for tomorrow, Apprentices complete chores, samurai families retire after tea and conversation, and servants move silently between tasks. The city's strength lies in this rhythm. Each individual knows their role, each family understands its obligations, and social hierarchies provide structure that keeps potential chaos at bay. Yet the very fragility of that order is always present. A single miscommunication, a sudden economic shift, or a natural disaster flooding of the Sumida River, fire in a merchant quarter can ripple outward, affecting dozens or hundreds. Within your household, order is maintained through vigilance and repetition. Sliding doors are aligned, tatami mats swept, and utensils arranged carefully. Food stores are counted, grain measured, and tea prepared with ceremony. Each action, though seemingly small, contributes to stability. Discipline is a form of quiet power. The household runs smoothly because you anticipate needs, correct mistakes before they grow, and reinforce expectations in a subtle, almost invisible way. Even so, Edo's broader society is not static. Policies from the Tokugawa shogunate ripple into daily life. Restrictions on travel, dress, and trade ensure control, yet also constrain growth and opportunity. Samurai stipends fluctuate, merchants maneuver for advantage, and the lower classes adapt through thrift, cooperation, or strategic alliances. Your household exists in the center of these pressures, shielded by routine, yet inevitably shaped by forces beyond immediate control. Life in Edo is largely measured, not by great events, but by accumulated small acts. Each day's successes, clean floors, intact utensils, proper etiquette observed, reinforce the system. Each failure, a mismanaged account, a poorly repaired screen, teaches caution. The pace is slow, almost imperceptible, yet it carries immense significance for long-term survival and stability. Even in quiet moments, you feel the balance of responsibility. Children observe and learn. Apprentices internalize standards. The household embodies continuity. Every gesture is a rehearsal for future stability. Aligning doors, tending hearths, preserving grain. These tasks may seem mundane to outsiders, yet they are essential to maintaining the fragile harmony of Edo life. The slow rhythm cultivates reflection. You consider the city as a whole. The canals, streets, merchant quarters, and samurai residences are all threads in a single tapestry. Its endurance depends on everyone performing their part, often without recognition or reward. The human network here is invisible but crucial, woven through repetition, hierarchy, and careful attention. And yet the awareness of fragility remains. You know that Edo is a system, delicately balanced between prosperity and disruption. Fires rage frequently in wooden quarters, diseases emerge unexpectedly, and political edicts can shift resource allocation. Social unrest is rare but possible, and economic pressures silently shape behavior. Stability is never permanent, it is maintained through vigilance, patience, and subtle adaptation. As the evening deepens, you sit with family around the small hearth. Tea warms your hands, rice nourishes bodies, and conversation flows within strict bounds of etiquette. You feel the steady satisfaction of a day completed well, of work done with diligence, of harmony maintained. But you also sense the omnipresent tension. Life here is quiet and controlled, but that control depends entirely on adherence to countless small details. And so, the lesson of Edo is clear. Peace is cultivated slowly, through discipline, attention, and respect for limits. It is fragile but resilient when nurtured. The city endures not through grand acts, but through countless small, precise, and repeated efforts by ordinary people, efforts often invisible to the wider world. Finally, as the lantern flickers one last time and shadows retreat into corners, you consider the question that has quietly followed every slow hour. When the subtle networks of order are disrupted, how easily can this carefully maintained harmony survive? And what does it cost to restore once it falters? Story 5. The quiet life of a Venetian artisan in the 16th century. Imagine the gentle lapping of water against wooden pilings, the distant toll of church bells, and narrow streets lined with colorful buildings that lean slightly toward the canals. You live in Venice during the 16th century, a city of canals, bridges, and floating markets. The water is your constant companion. It carries goods, people, and stories. Every boat that passes reflects sunlight in shimmering patterns across your workshop walls. You are an artisan, a glassblower perhaps, or a woodcarver working in a small family shop tucked away on a quieter canal. The world outside seems lively, with gondolas ferrying merchants, nobles, and visitors. But your life is measured not in spectacle, but in repetition. The shaping of molten glass, the carving of intricate designs, the careful polishing of surfaces. Every hour is devoted to precision, patience, and the subtle mastery of your craft. Morning begins with preparation. You check tools, tongs, molds, shears, and blowpipes for a glassworker, chisels, mallets, and sanding stones for a woodworker. You inspect raw materials, ensuring they meet standards, as even slight imperfections could ruin the day's work. A misjudged temperature, a flawed grain, or a chipped mold can destroy hours of effort. Outside, Venice is alive with commerce. Merchants call across canals. Wagons bump over bridges. The smell of salted fish mingles with baked bread. Tourists from distant lands may wander aimlessly, marveling at the city's beauty, unaware of the labor hidden in workshops and warehouses. You move through this world with practiced efficiency, your eyes always noting details. The water level at your doorstep, the stability of the wooden planks, the arrival of clients or suppliers. In the workshop, time follows the rhythm of labor. For a glassblower, fire must be maintained, molten glass rotated evenly, and temperature controlled precisely. For a woodcarver, every cut must follow the grain, angles measured subtly, surfaces smoothed carefully. Hours pass in focused repetition, the outside noise fading into a quiet background hum. Meals are simple, often prepared at the workshop: bread, cheese, dried fish, and occasionally fresh vegetables. Breaks are brief. You eat while reviewing your work, noting imperfections, planning the next steps. Every decision matters. Even small mistakes compound over time, affecting quality, reputation, and future commissions. The social hierarchy of Venice shapes your interactions. Patrons from noble families, wealthy merchants, and visiting dignitaries may request custom pieces. Courtesies, proper language, and careful presentation are as vital as craftsmanship. A minor faux pas, an incorrectly folded package, a delayed delivery can affect the household's livelihood. Reputation is your most important currency. Afternoons are often spent finishing earlier work, repairing tools, or mentoring apprentices. These young hands require guidance, patience, and instruction. You teach not only technique but discipline, the correct way to hold a chisel, to rotate a glass sphere, or to judge the consistency of molten material. Apprentices learn through observation, repetition, and correction, a slow accumulation of knowledge that ensures continuity of skill. Evening brings reflection and preparation. You clean the workspace, store tools carefully, and check inventory. Materials are counted, small repairs made, and preparation for tomorrow's labor is meticulous. The canals are quieter now, the last gondolas sliding home under lamplight. The city seems peaceful, but you know that order depends on constant attention. Tides, water levels, and social interactions can all disrupt routine. At night, your household is quiet. Lamps glow softly, and the canals reflect light like liquid gold. You sit with family, sharing small portions of food, recounting the day's tasks, or teaching apprentices subtle skills. Life is repetitive but steady, defined by rhythm, patience, and attention to detail. And yet the constant question remains. As Venice thrives on trade, tides, and external demand, how resilient is your small workshop against storms, economic shifts, or political changes? The answer is uncertain, but the rhythm of daily labor persists, preparing you slowly but surely for whatever the tides of history may bring. Morning in Venice brings a quiet ritual. You rise with the faint light spilling through shutters, the scent of salt and algae drifting in from the canal. Boats slide along the waterways, carrying goods and passengers, but your day begins in the workshop, in the company of tools, raw materials, and apprentices. The city beyond is vibrant, yet your world is defined by precision, repetition, and the slow accumulation of skill. You inspect yesterday's work. A small imperfection in a glass vase catches your eye, barely noticeable but unacceptable. Every day is a test of patience and concentration. Mistakes are small but meaningful. In the mercantile networks of Venice, reputation can shift with the perception of quality. A single flawed piece could delay a commission or discourage a patron from returning. Your apprentice hovers, hands trembling over tools, eager but inexperienced. You guide them carefully, demonstrating proper technique. The rotation of molten glass in the fire, the angle of a carving chisel against the grain, the subtle pressure required to achieve symmetry. Each correction is measured, deliberate. Perfection is unattainable, but improvement is constant. Over years, repetition accumulates into expertise, and the artisan's subtle mastery becomes second nature. Outside, the canals shape the city's rhythms. Tide schedules dictate when goods can be delivered or boats launched. Water levels rise and fall, shifting cargo, creating obstacles or offering opportunities. You learn to read the currents, anticipate changes, and adjust accordingly. The city's infrastructure, the bridges, planks, and docks, is an extension of your workspace, demanding constant awareness. Meals are functional. Bread, cheese, salted fish, and wine sustain you through hours of labor. Eating is rarely leisurely. It is punctuated by observation, reflection, and preparation for the next task. Time itself is measured by work, not by clocks. Morning and afternoon blend together in a continuum of disciplined action, punctuated only by the subtle changes of light and tide. The workshop hums with quiet energy. Glass bubbles over flames, wood shavings pile in corners, and apprentices murmur as they practice their craft. The labor is repetitive, almost meditative, yet demanding. Skill is exercised not in sudden exertion, but in the slow, steady refinement of technique. Even small moments adjusting the temperature of molten glass, resharpening a chisel are essential to success. Trade shapes the outer pressures on your life. Venice is a city of commerce. Patrons visit your workshop, requesting specific patterns, colors, or designs. Words must be chosen carefully. Social grace is as vital as skill. A misstep in etiquette can damage relationships as surely as a flawed piece of work. Every interaction, though subtle, carries consequences for the survival of your household and the future of apprentices under your guidance. Afternoons often bring maintenance tasks. You repair tools, clean molds, polish surfaces, and organize materials. These small, repetitive acts preserve efficiency and ensure readiness for more intensive labor. In this way, the mundane is elevated into a form of preservation, safeguarding both work and livelihood. Evening falls gently over Venice. The canals glow with lantern light, reflecting softly across the water. The city seems tranquil, but you are aware that life here depends on constant vigilance. Storms can flood streets and workshops, economic fluctuations can alter patronage, and political decrees can shift taxes and trade rules. Venice is beautiful, but it is also a fragile ecosystem of labor, reputation, and precise timing. As night deepens, you sit near the canal, observing gondolas moving silently through lamplight. Apprentices finish tasks and head home. Your family shares a simple meal, reflecting on the day. Even in the absence of dramatic events, you sense the balance required to sustain life. Attention, skill, observation, and quiet adaptation to the ever-shifting environment. And yet, a persistent thought lingers. As the tides of commerce, weather, and politics continue to shape Venice, how long can the delicate equilibrium of your workshop endure without disruption? Every day is preparation, every act deliberate, and every moment teaches endurance in the face of uncertainty. The sun rises over Venice, casting gold across the canals and highlighting the subtle curves of buildings that lean slightly toward the water. Your workshop, tucked away on a quiet canal, hums with life. The day begins as always with careful inspection of tools, materials, and previous work. Each step is deliberate, a precise rotation of molten glass, a measured strike of the chisel, a gentle polishing of a carved surface. Repetition is both the safeguard of quality and the rhythm of life. Apprentices arrive, eager but inexperienced. You demonstrate techniques, correcting hands that tremble or tilt at the wrong angle. You repeat motions, sometimes dozens of times until mastery emerges. You understand that your influence stretches beyond immediate labor. Each carefully guided apprentice will carry your knowledge forward, shaping Venice's artisan culture long after your own hands have tired. Outside, the canals pulse with energy. Merchants deliver goods, gondolas slide along the water, and distant bells mark the passage of hours. Venice's rhythm is subtle yet relentless. Tides, markets, and traffic are woven into the daily calculus of survival. You observe carefully, adjusting delivery times, managing inventory, and responding to patrons with practiced courtesy. In every decision, the city exerts influence, shaping your choices in quiet but constant ways. The afternoon is a continuation of steady labor. Raw materials are transformed through skill, patience, and precision. Small errors are corrected immediately, flaws are minimized. Even mundane tasks, cleaning molds, arranging workspaces, storing glass, safely carry significance. Venice's success as a trade hub depends not only on spectacle, but on the reliability of countless artisans like you. Meals remain functional but communal. Bread, cheese, and preserved fish nourish the body while conversations teach etiquette, stories, and cultural continuity. Apprentices learn to value rhythm over rush, craft over convenience, and observation over assumption. Life here is quiet but meaningful, measured by the accumulation of repeated acts rather than dramatic interventions. Yet the broader world presses in subtly. Political changes in the Venetian Republic, shifts in trade routes, or the arrival of foreign merchants can ripple into your workshop. Prices fluctuate, demand shifts, and patrons' expectations evolve. Survival is not guaranteed by skill alone, it depends on adaptability, awareness, and discretion. Evening brings reflection. Lanterns glow softly across the water, illuminating the canal outside your workshop. You inspect tools one last time, ensure materials are stored safely, and review the day's work. The apprentices leave, carrying lessons forward. The household gathers for a quiet meal. Outside, Venice continues in its delicate balance. Commerce, labor, water, and human interaction flowing together in a rhythm that is both resilient and fragile. As night deepens, you sit beside the canal, listening to water lapping against pilings and gondolas moving under lamplight. You consider the significance of your work. The city may be celebrated for its grand architecture, its political stability, or its maritime power, but Venice endures because of countless quiet hands like yours, shaping, repairing, and sustaining the daily life that makes such grandeur possible. And yet, one thought remains unsettled. In a world of unpredictable tides, political shifts, and economic fluctuation, how long can this delicate equilibrium crafted through centuries of repetition, patience, and skill persist without being overturned by forces beyond your control? Story 6. Farming in the shadow of the Alps. Life in a Swiss mountain village. Imagine waking to the faint glow of dawn over jagged peaks, the air crisp and cold with the remnants of night frost. You live in a small mountain village in the Swiss Alps during the 17th century. Your home is built of timber and stone, roofed with thick shingles, and insulated with hay or straw. Smoke curls from chimneys as neighbors awaken, and the distant sound of cowbells punctuates the still air. Your day begins early. Before the sun rises fully, you check the livestock. Goats, sheep, and perhaps a cow must be accounted for. Their survival depends on shelter, feed, and careful attention. In these high-altitude valleys, winter is long and unforgiving. A single storm or deep snowfall can threaten months of preparation. Food is scarce and carefully managed. Grain is stored in stone-lined bins to protect it from moisture and pests. Cheese, salted meat, and dried fruits are preserved from the previous harvest. Every ration is calculated. A misstep could have consequences that last weeks. Surplus is rare and waste is unacceptable. Survival in the Alps demands precision. After tending animals, you move to fields or terraces carved into the mountainside. Farming here is difficult. Steep slopes, thin soil, and limited arable land make every seed count. You plant hardy crops such as barley, rye, or potatoes, depending on the season, and maintain irrigation channels that channel precious meltwater from alpine streams. Life in the village is tightly knit. Each household relies on others for assistance with plowing, harvesting, or repairing roofs damaged by heavy snow. Cooperation is essential. Isolation can be deadly. Knowledge of the mountains, the timing of snowmelt, the movement of wildlife, the signs of impending storms is shared freely and preserved across generations. Evenings are spent indoors. You repair tools, mend clothing, and preserve what remains of food. Stories are told to pass knowledge and entertain children. You recount the strategies your ancestors used to endure particularly harsh winters, teaching the younger generation to respect the mountains while also asserting mastery over the landscape through skill and labor. Despite the challenges, there is a quiet rhythm to life. Sunrise brings preparation, daylight brings labor, and dusk brings reflection and maintenance. The mountains are constant, formidable yet predictable. Their cycles dictate work, dictate survival, and provide a sense of stability amidst scarcity. Yet uncertainty persists. Avalanches, rockslides, or early frosts can wipe out fields and threaten livestock. Disease or injury in a small household can ripple outward, affecting the entire community. Every day, survival hinges on attention to detail, careful planning, and adherence to long-established practices. Even with hardship, there is a certain meditative quality to this life. Repetition and rhythm provide clarity. The boundaries of survival are tangible: the slope of a terrace, the reach of irrigation channels, the capacity of the granary. Life is measured in small, deliberate acts, each reinforcing the next. And as night settles over the alpine village, a thought lingers. How many more winters can be endured without innovation, external aid, or unexpected fortune? The mountains are eternal, yet human endurance is finite, and each generation inherits both the wisdom and the fragility of those who came before. The morning light filters weakly through the clouds, casting long shadows across the terraces carved into the mountainside. Life in the village continues in deliberate, measured rhythm. You rise with the first glow, your body conditioned to hours of labor and cold air, your mind attuned to the subtle cues of weather, livestock, and crops. After tending animals, ensuring they are fed, sheltered, and healthy, you check the fields. The terraces are narrow, bordered by stone walls that protect against erosion. Each plant matters, soil is scarce, and the alpine growing season is short. You inspect for frost damage, signs of pests, and soil moisture. Water from streams is precious. Irrigation channels must be monitored carefully. A mismanaged channel can leave crops parched or washed away. Villagers rely on cooperation. Neighbors help each other dig terraces, repair fences, and transport hay up steep paths. No one works alone. The dangers of the environment, the heavy snows, avalanches, or sudden storms demand vigilance and communal effort. Even small miscalculations can have cascading effects. A single collapsed wall can ruin several plots. A delayed harvest can starve livestock. Inside the home, labor is ongoing. You repair clothing, sharpen tools, and check stored provisions. Grain is counted, cheese wheels inspected for mold, and meat carefully salted or smoked. Meals are simple but sustaining. Barley porridge, bread made from rye, dried meat, and cheese. Every bite is intentional. Food is never wasted. Children learn the ways of the mountains early. They assist with herding, carry small bundles of firewood, and observe elder villagers in the rhythms of daily life. Knowledge of weather patterns, animal behavior, and safe routes is taught slowly, through example and repetition. Mistakes are corrected carefully, as the cost of error can be high. Evening brings reflection and preparation. The long alpine night encourages patience. Fires are tended, shelters reinforced, and families gather to share stories of past winters, successful harvests, and near disasters. Tales of resilience are passed down with an almost ritual precision, not for drama but for instruction. Survival depends on continuity, on learning from past experience. Despite hardships, life in the Alps has a meditative quality. Work is predictable and every act is meaningful. Labor ties you directly to survival. Each stone wall built, each seed planted, and each animal fed is a contribution to the household's endurance. Time is measured by tasks, seasons, and weather patterns, not by clocks or abstract calendars. Yet the mountains are indifferent. Avalanches, storms, and sudden frost arrive without warning, reminding you of human vulnerability. No matter the skill or diligence, external forces always exist beyond control. Planning and cooperation mitigate risk, but they cannot eliminate it. This duality, the predictability of routine versus the unpredictability of nature, is the core tension of life here. As the sun dips behind peaks, casting long shadows over terraces and forests, you sit with family near the hearth. Smoke rises slowly, carrying warmth and comfort. The day has been long, steady, and demanding, but survival has been achieved once again. And still, one question remains, lingering as the night deepens. How many more winters can your village endure with only tradition, careful planning, and cooperation? At what point will environmental shifts, disease, or chance disrupt the rhythm that has sustained generations? The first hints of spring arrive slowly, like a whispered promise through the still cold alpine air. Snow melts unevenly across the terraces, feeding the narrow irrigation channels with clear water. Streams swell, and the air carries the scent of wet stone, thawing earth, and early shoots of green. You awaken to this subtle change, knowing that survival now depends on careful labor and keen observation. You begin by inspecting livestock, ensuring that winter has left no lasting damage. Sheep emerge from their shelters, bleating softly, while goats cautiously navigate the snow-damp pastures. The cow, though thin from months of limited grazing, provides enough milk for household needs. Every animal is both sustenance and security, and their condition shapes the work ahead. Fields are cleared of winter debris. Stones displaced by frost are returned to walls. Terraces are reinforced where snowmelt has loosened soil. Seeds are planted in small, carefully measured rows, chosen for hardiness and compatibility with short growing seasons. Crops must mature quickly before the next frost, and irrigation channels are maintained to ensure maximum efficiency. Every act is deliberate. Mistakes can result in weeks of lost food. The village awakens fully as neighbors emerge to assist. Cooperation remains central. Terraces are repaired together, water distribution is coordinated, and communal knowledge about weather and soil is shared. Even minor errors, a misaligned channel or overtilled soil, can ripple outward, affecting the work of others. The rhythm of life is slower than in lowland towns, but no less urgent. Inside homes, preparations continue. Grain is inspected, cheese wheels rotated, and tools sharpened. Families gather to eat, reflecting on the long winter just past. Conversations focus on practical concerns, how best to allocate resources, which fields need attention first, and which livestock require immediate care. Stories of previous years' successes and failures are recounted, reinforcing practical wisdom and cultural continuity. Children accompany elders to the pastures and terraces, learning to observe animal behavior, predict weather, and respect the limits imposed by the landscape. Knowledge here is hands-on, learned through repeated observation and careful practice. Mistakes are instructive, and survival is taught as a combination of experience, attentiveness, and cooperative effort. The longer daylight hours allow for increased work. Terraces can be tilled further, hay can be gathered, and repairs to fences and barns are more easily managed. Every act is measured against necessity. There is no labor without purpose, yet nothing is left unobserved. Time is quantified by action, not clocks, and the passage of days is defined by visible progress in sustaining life. Evenings provide moments of reflection. Fires are tended, tools stored, and meals shared. The landscape is quiet, punctuated only by animal sounds and distant mountain winds. The lessons of winter remain vivid. Patience, vigilance, and adaptation are as important as physical labor. Life here is fragile, dependent on both human effort and the unpredictability of the mountains. As night falls, you stand on a terrace, gazing across the valley. The snow is receding and the promise of the new season is tangible. You understand that each year is a cycle. Winter challenges endurance, spring tests preparation, summer requires vigilance, and autumn secures the fruits of labor. Each season reinforces the rhythm of life, binding generations together in shared experience and knowledge. Yet even in the promise of spring, one thought lingers. The mountains endure, indifferent to human labor and care. How long can your village sustain itself against the constant unpredictability of avalanches, early frost, and other hidden hazards? Each generation inherits wisdom and resilience, but also the unspoken fragility of life at the edge of the world. Story 7. The Long Days of a Scottish Highland Shepherd. You wake to a faint gray light brushing the rugged contours of the Scottish Highlands. Mist clings to the slopes, drifting over rocky outcrops and heather-strewn valleys. Your world is measured in hills, streams, and stone walls, boundaries and landmarks that dictate the rhythm of each day. You are a shepherd, responsible for a modest flock of sheep that provide wool, meat, and milk for your family. Survival here depends on vigilance, endurance, and knowledge passed down through generations. Your morning begins before the sun fully rises. Each sheep must be accounted for, carefully herded, and guided to grazing areas safe from cliffs, bogs, and predators. Every animal is valuable. A lost ewe or lamb is a setback that ripples through food, income, and the labor balance of your household. The landscape is both generous and unforgiving, abundant with wild forage, but treacherous in hidden streams, crags, and sudden storms. Food and supplies are carefully rationed. Oats, barley, cheese, and salted meat are stored for the long winters. Nothing is wasted, every scrap counts. The shepherd's life is simple but exacting, its success dependent on foresight, observation, and unceasing attention to small details. The hills themselves dictate your movements. Routes between pastures are preordained, determined by safety, access to water, and the quality of grazing. You learn to read the land as it changes with the seasons. The subtle softening of peat indicating spring thaw, the patterns of frost signaling approaching winter, and the behavior of birds and wild animals foretelling storms. Each observation is a survival tool. You carry your tools and provisions, a crook, a small knife, perhaps a lantern, and a meal wrapped in cloth. The day stretches long before you, guiding sheep, repairing fences, clearing paths, and occasionally driving livestock to market. Every action is deliberate, performed with awareness that carelessness can have serious consequences. Social interaction is minimal but essential. Occasionally, neighbors appear to exchange news, advice, or goods. Shepherding is solitary work, but it exists within a web of interdependence. Shared knowledge about predator patterns, weather, or seasonal grazing practices allows the community to survive in this rugged environment. Cooperation, though infrequent, is critical. Meals are functional, eaten while sitting on a moss-covered rock or near a small fire. There is little indulgence. The landscape demands efficiency, and time is measured in tasks rather than leisure. You eat quickly, return to the flock, and continue the slow, repetitive labor that defines your existence. Evening brings a pause but not respite. Sheep are gathered, counted, and sheltered if possible. Fences are inspected, paths cleared of obstacles, and watch maintained against wolves or other predators. The day ends as it began, with observation, care, and vigilance. The life of a shepherd is monotonous yet structured. Each task, though small, is meaningful. Every act of repair, guidance, and observation contributes to the survival of the flock, and by extension, the household. There is no glory here, no dramatic battles, no fame, but there is endurance, skill, and a quiet, persistent engagement with the natural world. And as the sun finally sinks behind distant peaks, casting the hills into shadow, one question remains in your mind. How many more winters can you endure in this isolated, demanding landscape? And how much of your life's rhythm depends on forces, weather, terrain, and predation that you cannot control? The morning mist lingers longer on some slopes, hiding small ravines and rock outcroppings. You step carefully, your eyes scanning for signs of hidden danger, uneven ground, loose rocks, or the faintest tracks of wolves or foxes. Life as a shepherd in the Scottish Highlands demands constant vigilance. Even a small lapse can cost livestock, or worse, human injury. Your flock moves as a living unit, their woolly bodies shifting across the hills, grazing in patterns that maximize nutrition while avoiding overuse of fragile terrain. You guide them with your crook, soft whistles, and measured commands. Each day is a negotiation with the land, and animals a delicate balance of encouragement, restraint, and anticipation. Food is both sustenance and security. Barley porridge, oatcakes, and smoked or salted meat provide energy for long hours. Every ration is calculated, particularly in winter months when forage is scarce and snow covers most grazing. Stockpiles are guarded, counted, and rotated. Even a small misjudgment could mean weeks of hunger. The highland weather shapes everything. Storms arrive suddenly, clouds gather over mountain ridges without warning, and snow can blanket pastures within hours. You learn to read the subtle signs, the direction of the wind, the color of distant clouds, or the sudden silence of birds. Knowledge of these cues comes from experience and observation, and mistakes can be fatal. The landscape teaches humility. Survival is always partial, effort tempered by awareness of the uncontrollable. Repairs and maintenance occupy much of your day. Stone walls are mended to protect livestock, fences repaired against the wind, and paths cleared of fallen branches or rocks. Even minor damage left unattended can escalate into larger problems, threatening safety and the integrity of pastures. Your work is repetitive, almost meditative, yet each repetition carries high stakes. Social interaction is limited but crucial. Occasional visits to neighboring crofts bring news, advice, and trade. Stories of predator sightings, particularly wolves, are shared. Practical wisdom circulates quietly, ensuring that no family endures hazards alone. Cooperation may be intermittent, but it is essential to survival in a harsh and sparsely populated landscape. As afternoon stretches, the pace remains steady but strenuous. You may drive the flock toward higher grazing as snow begins to melt or descend to low pastures as temperatures rise. Every movement is deliberate, minimizing risk while maximizing productivity. You learn to anticipate animal behavior, reading subtle shifts in posture, grouping, and gaze that indicate danger, hunger, or illness. Evenings bring the flock home. Each animal is accounted for, inspected for injuries or signs of disease. Predation is a constant threat, and the smallest oversight can have consequences that last weeks. Fires are tended, meals consumed, and repairs completed. The workday is long but essential. Survival in the highlands is incremental, built through repetition, attentiveness, and endurance. The seasons themselves are teachers. Winter demands preparation and conservation. Spring rewards careful planning. Summer tests stamina and vigilance. Autumn requires preservation and foresight. Life follows this slow, cyclical pattern, and within it, you gain an intimate understanding of the land, animals, and natural rhythms that define existence. Even in hardship, there is a meditative quality to your labor. Each step on mossy rock, each movement of the crook, and each observation of the flock is deliberate, reinforcing the rhythm of life and the subtle mastery required for survival. You measure time not in hours or days, but in tasks completed, flocks accounted for, and land tended. And yet, the ever-present uncertainty lingers. How many more years can the flock thrive under your care? And how long can the delicate balance of weather, predators, and human vigilance persist before circumstances beyond control disrupt it? Twilight drapes the Scottish Highlands in muted blues and purples. The wind moves across the ridges with a steady whisper, carrying the scent of wet heather and distant pine. You stand on a rocky knoll, watching your flock settle into sheltered pastures for the night. Each sheep accounted for, each lamb close to its mother, each path and fence intact. Your careful labor of the day has maintained the delicate balance of survival. The day's work lingers in your body, shoulders tense from climbing, hands roughened from the crook, boots damp from traversing frozen streams. Yet with the completion of evening chores comes a quiet satisfaction. The mountains are indifferent, yet your skill, patience, and vigilance have preserved life, and for now the household and flock remain safe. Evening fires glow warmly in crofts and cottages. Families gather for simple meals, oat cakes, salted meat, cheese, perhaps a splash of ale. Conversation is minimal but deliberate, often focused on practical concerns, storm warnings, animal health, or tools needing repair. Wisdom is shared through experience, advice passed quietly from elders to younger generations. Knowledge is survival, and storytelling is a vehicle for continuity. Children, if present, are taught observation and endurance. They watch you as you mend fences, guide animals, and anticipate hazards. Mistakes are corrected with patience. Each lesson embeds the rhythms of the land, the behavior of animals, and the nuances of weather into their understanding. The skills you impart today may determine their survival decades from now. You reflect on the slow passage of time. The life of a Highland shepherd is defined less by dramatic events than by accumulated acts, each fence repaired, each path cleared, each sheep tended. These small, repetitive tasks constitute the true architecture of survival. Fame and fortune may exist elsewhere, but here, stability is earned through patience, vigilance, and quiet skill. Even as life follows its steady rhythm, uncertainty never disappears. Avalanches, early frost, or sudden storms could undo a season's work in hours. Predators may take a lamb despite your attention. Illness can strike a family member or livestock, and resources are always finite. The mountains are beautiful, but their grandeur is paired with constant challenge. Yet in this quiet life, there is also a profound lesson. Endurance is cumulative, resilience is built through repetition, and human skill, though modest, can temper the unpredictability of nature. The Highland shepherd does not conquer the land. Rather, survival is a negotiation between effort, observation, and respect for the landscape. Night settles fully. Stars appear over the ridges, and the faint howl of distant wolves reminds you that vigilance never truly ends. You sit beside the fire, thinking of the long winters, short summers, and countless days spent on hillsides. Each day contributes to a legacy of survival, teaching lessons about patience, skill, and humility. And as the wind rustles through heather and pine, one question lingers. How long can this delicate equilibrium, the balance between human labor, animal care, and the whims of nature, persist before an unpredictable event alters everything? Each day teaches endurance, yet the mountains always remind you of life's fragility and the limits of control. Story 8. The rhythm of a rural English village in the 18th century. You awaken to the muted glow of morning over gently rolling fields in a small rural village of England during the 18th century. Smoke curls from chimneys, mingling with the mist that clings to hedgerows and low-lying pastures. The air smells faintly of damp earth, livestock, and freshly turned soil. Life in this village is slow, measured, and bound to the rhythm of the land. Your home is a modest timber-framed cottage with thatched roofing. Inside, the hearth is central both for warmth and cooking. Meals are simple: porridge in the morning, bread and cheese during the day, perhaps a stew in the evening. Every portion is carefully measured, for scarcity is always a concern, and food is both sustenance and security. Your day begins early. Livestock, cows, pigs, and chickens require attention. Milk must be collected, pens cleaned, and animals fed. Small errors in care can have lasting consequences. A sick cow may fail to provide milk. A neglected pig may fall prey to disease. A chicken lost to foxes reduces eggs for the household. Your hands are busy, your mind alert, your rhythm aligned with the needs of the animals and the land. The village is quiet at dawn. Narrow lanes wind between cottages and small plots of cultivated land. You hear the distant tolling of the church bell, calling neighbors to prayer or marking the start of daily labor. Every household operates within a delicate balance of routine, tending crops, repairing fences, and preparing for market. The interdependence is subtle but critical. Everyone's survival relies on adherence to unspoken social and practical contracts. Fields are tilled carefully, crop rotations planned over seasons. Barley, wheat, and root vegetables are grown with meticulous attention. Terraces are unnecessary here, but hedgerows, drainage ditches, and stone fences require constant maintenance to protect soil and livestock. Labor is repetitive yet purposeful, a daily negotiation with earth, weather, and nature's unpredictability. Meals during the day are functional, often taken while in the fields or by the livestock pens. There is little idle conversation. Time is measured by task completion rather than leisure. Children, if present, assist with chores, learning by observation and repetition. Skills are transmitted gradually as younger hands adopt the careful habits of elders. Social interaction occurs but is practical. Neighbors exchange news, trade surplus goods, or assist during particularly demanding tasks like harvests or fence repairs. Cooperation is less constant than in isolated mountain villages, but remains essential in sustaining both productivity and community cohesion. Afternoons stretch long. Work is punctuated by inspection and adjustment, soil quality, crop health, and livestock well-being. Even small acts, repairing a loose fence post, straightening a row of crops, or adjusting a water trough, contribute to survival and long-term stability. Each gesture is a quiet assertion of human order against nature's variability. As the sun lowers, tasks shift toward preparation for evening and the next day. Tools are cleaned, stock counted, and fires tended. Meals are prepared with care, preserving the household's modest stores. Evening is a time of reflection, as you watch the fading light over fields and hedgerows, aware that the day's labor is part of a larger, continuous cycle. Even in simplicity, the rhythm of the village life is demanding. Every day tests patience, attention, and endurance. You live within a network of responsibilities that stretches across time, landscape, and community. Survival is incremental, built through repeated acts of care, observation, and measured effort. And yet, as night falls, one thought lingers. How secure is this fragile equilibrium of village life against famine, disease, or unpredictable weather? Each season is an experiment in endurance, and the future depends on the careful preservation of knowledge, labor, and attention to detail. The morning fog lifts slowly over the fields, revealing low stone walls, hedgerows, and well-tended plots of barley, wheat, and root vegetables. Life in your English village follows a careful rhythm dictated by the seasons, the weather, and the needs of your household. You rise with the sun, your body conditioned to labor, your mind attuned to subtle signs in the land. You begin the day with the livestock. Cows are milked, pigs fed, chickens checked for eggs. Each animal's condition is a small measure of your household's security. A sick animal, a missing egg, or a weakened herd has consequences that ripple outward, affecting meals, income, and labor distribution. Attention to these details is constant, yet quietly performed. Fields demand vigilance. Soil must be turned and fertilized, crops weeded and protected. Seasonal knowledge guides each act, which fields require planting, which must rest, and how to anticipate spring floods or late frosts. Even minor misjudgments can result in reduced yield, threatening food stores and survival through the winter. Every small decision is meaningful. Community ties are practical yet essential. Neighbors assist during harvests or help repair fences and thatched roofs. Shared knowledge about weather, crop rotations, and livestock care circulates quietly, allowing the village to survive as a network of interdependent households. Cooperation may be intermittent, but it is essential for the long-term endurance of life here. Meals are functional and taken at intervals between work. Bread, porridge, cheese, and salted meat sustain the body while attention remains on the fields or livestock. Children observe closely, assisting when possible and learning skills through repeated practice. Education is largely hands-on. Survival, labor, and tradition are inseparable. Afternoon work often focuses on preparation for unpredictable events. You check stockpiles of grain, repair tools, and reinforce fences. Weather is a constant concern. Rain may make fields unworkable, frost can damage early shoots, and storms can flood low-lying plots. These minor, repetitive tasks are exercises in foresight, preserving stability against the uncertainties of nature. Evenings in the village bring reflection and preparation. Fires are tended, meals prepared, and work tools repaired for the next day. Families gather to share observations, discuss minor challenges, and pass on practical knowledge. Stories of past harvests, near famines, or successful seasons serve as both caution and instruction. The repetition of daily labor, while seemingly monotonous, instills endurance and an understanding of time as measured by cycles, not clocks. Every task reinforces the rhythm of life, creating a structure that allows the household to survive and even thrive within constraints imposed by weather, land, and resources. Yet uncertainty remains. A sudden drought, crop disease, or illness can disrupt months of careful labor. Life in the village is never guaranteed. It exists within the margins of preparation, attention, and cooperation. Success is incremental, survival is cumulative, and failure is a quiet but ever-present threat. As the sun sets, casting long shadows over hedgerows and pastures, one question lingers. How resilient is this rhythm of rural life against forces beyond human control, and how much of survival depends on the unrecorded knowledge quietly passed through generations? Twilight settles over your English village, softening the outlines of fields, hedgerows, and cottages. The air carries the scent of damp soil and smoke from hearth fires. The day's work concludes, yet the labor of care, observation, and preparation persists in subtler ways. Life here is a quiet negotiation with the land, the seasons, and the household. The livestock are accounted for one final time. Cows are milked, pigs penned securely, and chickens roost safely. The security of these animals determines food, income, and preparation for the coming months. Even a small oversight, a broken fence, a missing animal can cascade into serious consequences, reminding you that vigilance must extend beyond immediate labor. Fields are inspected and tools repaired. Seed stores are counted, grain preserved, and terraces or drainage ditches checked for potential hazards. The work of the day is reviewed, and preparation for tomorrow is quietly set in motion. Each repetition reinforces knowledge, skill, and stability. Survival is built not on sudden heroics, but on the accumulation of small, disciplined acts performed consistently. Evenings are also a time for quiet teaching and reflection. Children observe repairs, food preparation, and the care of animals, internalizing knowledge that ensures continuity across generations. You share practical stories how frost affected crops last year, or how a flood was mitigated by cooperative work with neighbors, embedding the wisdom of experience into daily life. Lessons are imparted slowly, almost imperceptibly, yet they shape the future of the household. Meals are modest yet restorative: porridge, bread, cheese, perhaps a small portion of meat. Conversation is sparse, deliberate, and purposeful. The household is united by routine and shared responsibility, and each member's contribution reinforces the fragile stability of life in the village. Night deepens and the village grows still. Hedges sway gently in the breeze, distant livestock settle, and the last fires in cottages burn low. There is a sense of quiet achievement. Another day survived, another cycle of labor completed. Yet the work is never done. Survival depends on continuous attention to detail, anticipation of the unpredictable, and reliance on shared knowledge that spans generations. Even in its simplicity, life in the village is demanding. The harmony of routine and cooperation is the bedrock of endurance. The land provides, but only in proportion to care, vigilance, and foresight. Each season reinforces lessons learned. Sow in spring, tend in summer, harvest in autumn, and prepare for winter's scarcity. The rhythm of life is subtle, but it carries profound consequences. And as you watch the last light fade, one thought lingers in the stillness. How long can this delicate balance persist in a world shaped by weather, disease, and human limitation? Each day is a practice in resilience, yet the future remains uncertain, dependent on the quiet persistence of ordinary acts repeated faithfully through time. Story 9. The labor of a Flemish weaver in the 17th century. You awaken in a small, timber-framed home in a bustling town of Flanders during the 17th century. The morning light filters through narrow windows onto the floorboards of your workshop, where looms stand ready. You are a weaver, your livelihood tied to the rhythm of threads, shuttle movements, and the ever-demanding pace of textile production. The day begins before the town stirs fully. You inspect the threads, linen, wool, or silk, ensuring uniform tension and absence of frays. Even minor flaws can spoil an entire length of fabric. Your fingers are nimble, conditioned over years to adjust tension, manipulate heddles, and guide the shuttle with precision. Skill here is not abstract. It is practical, disciplined, and cumulative. Your family assists where possible. Children may wind bobbins, carry finished lengths, or prepare dyes. Every member of the household contributes to the workflow. Efficiency and accuracy matter. Slow or careless work threatens orders from merchants, the primary source of income for your household. Outside, the town awakens. Cobbled streets echo with the sound of horse-drawn carts delivering raw materials, merchants calling to one another, and distant church bells marking the hour. Trade is the lifeblood of the town, and your craft exists within this broader economy. Delays, errors, or disputes can ripple outward, affecting not only your household but your reputation and future orders. Breakfast is simple: bread, cheese, and perhaps a small cup of weak beer. There is little time for leisure. Nourishment is functional, sustaining you for hours of repetitive labor. Time itself is measured not by clock but by rhythm of weaving. Warp set, shuttle passed, pattern adjusted, thread inspected. Each cycle reinforces skill and ensures the quality necessary to meet demanding standards. The loom dominates your attention. Threads must be aligned perfectly. Patterns, however simple or intricate, require careful attention. One errant pass of the shuttle can ruin a square of fabric. Your mind remains attentive yet calm, immersed in repetition. Work is both a practical necessity and a form of meditation, a slow engagement with precision, texture, and endurance. Merchants occasionally visit, checking progress, negotiating price, or specifying patterns for upcoming orders. Social skills are subtle but crucial. You must communicate effectively, demonstrate reliability, and maintain composure. A misstep, a poorly packaged bolt of cloth, a delayed shipment, or a careless word can damage relationships and livelihood. Craftsmanship and social navigation are intertwined, each influencing survival. Afternoons extend into sustained repetition. Hands ache, eyes strain, yet progress is visible. Lengths of fabric accumulate, bolts are folded and stacked, and the household's rhythm persists. Children learn by observation, internalizing techniques slowly and carefully. Apprenticeship is gradual. Skill cannot be rushed. Mastery grows through repetition, correction, and careful attention over months and years. Evening brings inspection, cleaning, and minor repairs to the loom. Threads are untangled, tools sharpened, and the workshop prepared for the next day. Food is shared, stories quietly told, and lessons passed to younger family members. Life is modest, constrained, and repetitive, yet every task is meaningful. Survival depends on accumulated diligence, endurance, and the quiet mastery of craft. And as night falls over the town, with its distant bell tolls and flickering street lanterns, one thought persists. In a world dependent on precision, trade, and reputation, how resilient is your livelihood to delays, mistakes, or fluctuations in demand? The threads you weave are delicate, yet they hold the fragile fabric of your family's survival. Morning arrives with a faint gray light spilling over the rooftops of your Flemish town. The streets are quiet at first, but the rhythm of commerce soon begins. Carts roll over cobblestones, merchants call across the squares, and deliveries of wool, linen, and silk arrive at workshops like yours. Your livelihood, and that of your household, is deeply intertwined with this predictable yet fragile pattern. The loom waits, its threads meticulously arranged from the night before. You check tension carefully, run your fingers over warped threads, and inspect the shuttle. Every detail matters. Even a minor misalignment can produce flaws in fabric that compromise orders and, by extension, income. Your skill is tested constantly, but repetition turns these minute adjustments into second nature. Children and apprentices assist with preparatory tasks, winding bobbins, sifting threads, or preparing dyes. These small acts may seem minor, yet each contributes to the overall efficiency and stability of the workshop. Training is patient and deliberate. Errors are corrected quietly but decisively. Knowledge is cumulative. Each generation inherits both technique and discipline, ensuring continuity of craft. Meals are functional and taken quickly, often at the loom itself. Bread, cheese, and small portions of dried meat sustain the body for hours of focused labor. Time is measured not in hours but in cycles of weaving. Warp tension checked, shuttle passed, threads inspected, bolts folded. Every repetition reinforces both skill and survival. Merchants arrive intermittently, inspecting progress or specifying patterns for the next order. Social skill is as vital as technical expertise. Delays, miscommunication, or inattentiveness can jeopardize future contracts. Your reputation is woven alongside the threads, fragile yet essential. Success depends on consistency, reliability, and careful attention to both work and relationships. Afternoons are long, the workshop alive with quiet industry. Fabric accumulates, bolts are stacked carefully, and threads are counted and measured. The monotony is profound, yet this very repetition underpins the household's stability. Life in the workshop is a slow, steady engagement with craft and survival, punctuated only by small adjustments and minor inspections. Weather and external events shape your work in subtle ways. Rain may slow deliveries, political edicts can influence trade routes, and outbreaks of disease among townsfolk can disrupt labor. Each day, the balance between preparation, skill, and circumstance is tested. The livelihood of the household is never guaranteed, dependent as it is on diligence, timing, and attention to details both seen and unseen. Evening brings a pause. Threads are untangled, tools cleaned, and workspaces organized. The family gathers for a modest meal. You reflect on the day's labor. Hours of repetition, small corrections, and careful observation have ensured progress and maintained livelihood. The workshop is both sanctuary and responsibility, a place where survival depends on skill, patience, and vigilance. And as darkness falls over the Flemish town, lanterns flickering in the streets, one question persists. How long can this delicate equilibrium endure reliant on skill, reputation, and trade before external forces, chance, or human error disrupt the careful rhythm you've built? Every thread you weave carries weight beyond the fabric itself, holding together the fragile stability of your household's survival. Night falls over your Flemish town, the streets quiet except for distant footsteps and the occasional flicker of a lantern in a neighbor's window. Inside your workshop, the loom stands still, threads aligned for the next day's labor. The hum of the day's activity has faded, leaving only the soft ticking of a clock and the occasional crackle of the hearth. You take stock of the day's work. Bolts of fabric are carefully folded and stacked, threads are measured and prepared, and tools are cleaned and maintained. Every action is deliberate, reinforcing skill, preserving material, and ensuring readiness for tomorrow. Mistakes are corrected immediately, minor adjustments accumulated into mastery over time. The day ends not with spectacle, but with the quiet satisfaction of a system maintained, a household secured. Children or apprentices assist with final chores, winding leftover threads, carrying small bundles, or preparing dye for the following day. Each act is part of a continuous cycle, teaching skills essential for survival and continuity of craft. Knowledge is not written in books here. It exists in practiced hands, taught patiently and reinforced through repetition. Meals are simple yet communal: bread, cheese, a little salted meat, and perhaps a modest stew. Conversation is subdued, focused on practical matters: orders to be fulfilled, repairs needed in the workshop, and observations about market conditions. Wisdom is shared slowly, quietly, through stories and instructions that emphasize foresight, diligence, and attention to detail. Even in its quiet, repetitive nature, life as a weaver is demanding. Success depends on precision, patience, and vigilance. Every bolt of cloth represents not only skill but also livelihood, stability, and reputation. One flaw can ripple outward, affecting contracts, income, and social standing. The repetition of labor is both a safeguard and a lesson. Mastery is built slowly, with care, and over time. Evening reflection reinforces the precarious balance of your world. The town continues to exist beyond the walls of the workshop, shaped by commerce, politics, and chance. A merchant's order may be delayed, a shipment lost, or demand shifted by forces beyond your control. The stability of your household is fragile, dependent on both meticulous effort and the unpredictable rhythms of the wider world. Yet there is also resilience. Skill, patience, and accumulated knowledge provide a degree of protection. Every careful measure, aligned threads, folded bolts, repaired tools is a bulwark against disorder. Each act contributes to a legacy of labor, passed through generations, ensuring that survival is possible even amidst uncertainty. And as you extinguish the lamps and sit in quiet reflection, one thought lingers: how long can this fragile network of skill, diligence, and trade persist before a single disruption, storm, fire, political upheaval, or error upends the delicate equilibrium you have built? Every thread you have woven carries weight far beyond the fabric itself, holding together the invisible scaffolding of family survival, community reputation, and the slow, quiet endurance of ordinary life. Story 10. A day in the life of a Japanese farmer in Edo period villages. The first light of dawn stretches over the low-lying rice paddies of a small Edo period village in Japan. Mist rises from waterlogged fields, curling around narrow paths and the wooden homes of your neighbors. You awaken in your simple thatched house, the smell of wet earth and smoke from the hearth mingling in the air. Life is measured in the slow rhythm of planting, tending, and harvesting, dictated by the seasons, water, and the cycles of the sun. Before the village fully stirs, you attend to essential morning chores. Water levels in the paddies must be checked, irrigation channels cleared of debris to ensure proper flow. Rice seedlings are delicate, and the careful balance of water, soil, and sunlight dictates survival for your household and contributes to the village's collective sustenance. One misstep could stunt growth, ruin a season's yield, or create cascading problems for both humans and livestock. Breakfast is modest: rice porridge, pickled vegetables, perhaps dried fish. Food is functional, providing energy for hours of labor under the sun and humidity. Every ration is meaningful, waste is avoided. The household's survival depends on careful management of every resource, and your day will be long and demanding. You step into the paddies. Water swirls around your calves, soil squishing underfoot. Each planting movement is deliberate, seedlings spaced properly, roots aligned, and every row straight and even. The work is repetitive, exhausting, but necessary. Mastery comes from repetition. Efficiency is survival. Time is measured not in hours but in progress along the rows, in the growth of crops, in the level of water maintained. Neighbors begin their work in parallel fields. Cooperation and observation are important. Knowledge of proper irrigation, crop rotation, and protection from pests is shared informally. Sometimes advice comes from elders or village officials. Sometimes observation and experience teach you better than any instruction. The rhythms of the village are subtle but crucial. Each household's labor contributes to collective stability. Children assist with light chores, learning the craft of survival from an early age. They carry water, gather tools, or help with smaller plots. Education is practical, hands-on, and gradual. Mistakes are corrected, but slowly, so the lessons endure. By the time they reach maturity, they will understand the delicate balance of life in the village and the responsibilities that sustain it. The sun climbs higher. Labor continues in measured cycles, tending seedlings, repairing embankments, clearing irrigation channels, and weeding. The monotony is profound, yet within it lies the structure of survival. Every repetitive act contributes to the stability of your household and the village. The labor is physical, but the mind remains engaged, aware of water levels, weather patterns, and soil condition. Evenings are for reflection and preparation. Tools are cleaned, water channels inspected, and meals shared. The day is long and fatigue is constant, yet satisfaction arises from small, tangible accomplishments. A row completed, an embankment reinforced, a channel flowing freely. The household survives another day, and life continues in quiet rhythm. And as the lanterns are lit in neighboring homes and mist settles over the paddies, one thought lingers. How many seasons can this balance endure, reliant on skill, observation, and cooperation, before an unforeseen flood, drought, or disease disrupts the careful equilibrium of village life? Morning in your Japanese Edo period village begins with the low hum of life stirring across the paddies. Birds call in the distance, water ripples in the canals, and neighbors move carefully along narrow earthen paths between plots. The rhythm of village life is subtle, repetitive, and structured around survival, sustenance, and cooperation. Your day starts with the irrigation channels. Maintaining precise water levels is crucial. Too much water drowns seedlings, too little slows growth. You remove debris, check the embankments, and adjust flow carefully. Small miscalculations could reduce a season's yield, affecting food for your household and obligations to local authorities or landlords. Every action has consequences beyond the immediate moment. Labor in the paddies is intense and unrelenting. Knees and calves are submerged in muddy water as you plant or transplant seedlings, each movement deliberate. Your hands are skilled and patient, trained over years to handle the delicate rice roots without damaging them. Every row completed is a small triumph, reinforcing not only skill but survival itself. Children and younger villagers assist where they can. They carry water, help with lighter tasks, or observe your methods. Education here is hands-on. Repetition, correction, and observation cultivate understanding. Mistakes are instructive, not dramatic, and survival knowledge is transmitted quietly, yet effectively from one generation to the next. The broader community interacts intermittently. Coordination is essential. Irrigation channels are shared, embankments often require collective labor, and pest threats are addressed communally. Knowledge flows informally who has observed flood patterns, which fields require rotation, and which households have surplus seed or tools. Cooperation is occasional but vital, reinforcing a network that sustains the village through long seasons of labor. Meals are functional and brief. Rice, pickles, dried fish, and tea provide sustenance between stretches of repetitive labor. Attention remains focused on crops, water, and embankments. The rhythm of the day is dictated by the sun and the precise conditions of the fields rather than clocks. Each task flows into the next seamlessly, a continuous cycle of observation, adjustment, and work. Weather governs many decisions. Early frost, Sudden storms or high winds can damage seedlings or embankments. Awareness of subtle cues, cloud formations, wind direction, temperature changes is critical. Survival depends on keen observation and rapid response, even when labor is physically exhausting and repetitive. Evening brings inspection and maintenance. Tools are cleaned, channels checked, and fields observed for damage or signs of pests. Meals are shared quietly, often with brief discussion of lessons learned, adjustments needed, or advice for younger family members. Reflection is practical. Each day is measured by the stability it preserves, the crops it sustains, and the knowledge transmitted. Yet, even amidst structure and labor, uncertainty persists. Floods, droughts, or disease can undo months of careful work. Collective effort, attention to detail, and continuity of practice are necessary, but they do not guarantee success. Life in the Edo period village is measured in survival through cycles, repetition, and careful observation rather than extraordinary events. As the sun sinks behind distant hills and lanterns light the village pathways, one question remains: how many cycles of planting, tending, and harvesting can be sustained before nature or circumstance disrupts the fragile balance painstakingly maintained by generations of careful labor? The day fades into evening, and a soft orange light spreads across the Japanese Edo period village, reflecting on water-filled paddies. Mist rises slowly, curling along narrow earthen paths, and distant wooden homes glow with lantern light. You stand in the fields, surveying the work completed. Seedlings planted in neat rows, embankments intact, and irrigation channels flowing steadily. Another day of survival, diligence, and care has concluded. Livestock, if any, are checked one last time, and small tasks, repairing a tool, straightening a waterway, or inspecting the field for pest damage, are performed before dusk. Every careful act reinforces the household's stability, preserving both resources and the knowledge necessary for the coming days. Repetition is not monotony. It is mastery, a slow accumulation of skill essential to survival in a precarious environment. Meals are modest but communal: rice, pickled vegetables, perhaps dried fish, or small amounts of fermented soy. Conversation is practical, focused on the day's work, lessons learned, and minor adjustments needed tomorrow. Children observe attentively, absorbing techniques, water management, and subtle signs of environmental change. Education is practical, hands-on, and continuous. Life skills are inseparable from labor. The rhythm of the village continues even as night falls. Water levels in shared channels are checked, embankments inspected, and neighbors occasionally visit to exchange information or resources. Cooperation is intermittent but vital. Knowledge is shared quietly, ensuring that the fragile balance of survival, crop by crop, canal by canal, day by day, is maintained across households. Evening reflection brings awareness of both achievement and vulnerability. The paddies, fields, and infrastructure are intact, yet the threat of flood, drought, or pest infestation remains. Generations of farmers have worked to maintain this delicate equilibrium, transmitting knowledge slowly and carefully, yet there is no certainty. Each day's success is provisional, contingent on diligence, observation, and cooperation. In this life, time is measured by cycles rather than hours. The growth of seedlings, the steady flow of water, the patterns of rain and sun, and the rotations of planting and harvest. Each day is both repetition and progress, mundane yet meaningful. Survival is built on cumulative care, skill, and knowledge passed down through generations. And as night fully descends, you sit near the home's hearth, reflecting on the day's labor and the rhythm of your life. How many more cycles of planting and harvesting will sustain the household before chance, misfortune, or environmental upheaval disrupt the careful balance painstakingly maintained over decades? The answer remains unknown, yet the continuity of labor, observation, and collective knowledge forms a fragile but enduring scaffolding of life in the village.